اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So first of all, I would like to begin by praising Allah, and I would like to begin by asking Allah to exalt the mention and grant peace to our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and to his family and his companions. I would also like to extend my thanks and gratitude to all of the organizers, the administration of the masjid, who facilitated this event to take place in such a beautiful masjid. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place it heavy on the scale of their good deeds Yawm al-Qiyamah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this masjid a place which is blessed, a place where Allah's tranquility descends and the angels surround it, and mercy covers the people within it, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them in a gathering that is better than the gathering that they are in. Our topic today is a really beautiful topic. We're going to be talking about, it's difficult to maybe even find the right summary for it, but we're going to be talking about al-Madahib al-Fiqhiyah. The Madahib, the Madhab, as it relates to fiqh. Now it's very important that we call this al-Madahib al-Fiqhiyah, because what we're not here to talk about today is al-Madahib al-Aqadiyah, the different ways and the different means and the different beliefs that people have as it relates to Aqeedah and Iman. That's not our discussion today at all. Today we came to talk about al-Furu' al-Fiqhiyah, the branches of the religion as it relates to fiqh. And we came to talk about a number of things. We want to talk about Tarikh al-Madhab, where did the Madhab come in history, or what we might call Tatawwur al-Madahib, how the Madhab developed over history. Some of the scholars call it Tarikh al-Tashri', the history of Islamic legislation and law, and where that Islamic legislation and law came from. We also want to talk about how a person learns a madhab. And in this you must forgive me, because I'm a mix here, right here. I'm a strange mix. When I started studying Islam, I started studying it upon the madhab of Imam Ahmad. Not really out of choice, although it's an excellent madhab to study, but just because that was what was available for my teachers. So we took Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat and these books in the madhab of Imam Ahmad, Siraat-al-Mustaqeem and these books. Then I started teaching in Al-Madrasatul-Umariyah. So we went on the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i. So all that I'm going to gather for you for the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i, I took it from Shaykh Abdul Rahman. So not that I'm blaming Shaykh, if I say something wrong it's my fault, but I took it from him because he grew up in the madhab, studying the madhab and memorizing the books of the madhab and teaching the madhab. So from him I took some discussion about al-madhab al-Shafi'i. As for the Hanafi madhab, which I think is important for us to talk about because it's very popular here in South Africa, I went to research some of the books and the way people study the madhab. I researched it for myself, so I'm not going to say to you I'm not an authority on the madhab, but we took some of the most famous books that are studied in the madhab just to present to you how a person studies. Because as we're going to talk about later on today, inshaAllah ta'ala, al-hukmu ala al-shay far'un an tasawwurih. This is very important, wallahi ikhwani. This is something that I'm going to give you as a principle. If you want just to kind of say, okay, today I'm a bit tired, I'm going to switch off. I'm going to really give you basically two things. If you take these two things as general principles, everything I'm going to say is going to fall under these two things. The first, al-hukmu ala al-shay far'un an tasawwurih. You can't issue a ruling for something until you understand what the thing you're issuing a ruling for is. For so many people, I see them arguing about al-Madahib al-Fiqhiyya, and the person has tasawwurun, a tasawwur which is false, khati', or even we can say tasawwurun batil, a completely false understanding of what the madhab is. So someone comes and says, haram alayk, haram, you cannot take a madhab. The other one comes and says, fardu ayn upon you. Like they said to me when I first became Muslim, they said, Ya akhi, nashukku fi imanik, we doubt your iman. I said, why, what did I do? They said, which madhab are you? The problem, all of this discussion is al-khata' fi tasawwur al-madhab. They don't have an understanding of what the madhab fiqhi is at all. So this one is arguing about something, his understanding of the madhab is completely wrong, and he has no tasawwur of what a madhab fiqhi is. And the other one also has no proper tasawwur of what the madhab fiqhi is. And that's why sometimes you might find, and we talk about this later, you might find that a person argues with you over something which really is, and we're going to cover this, is a nice mas'ala later on. Can an ordinary person, or I'm not going to say can, it's wrong. I'm going to say, to what extent can an ordinary person, a non-learned person, follow a madhab? Of course, intisab we agree. And anyone can say, Muhammad Tim al-Hanafi, Muhammad Tim al-Maliki, Muhammad Tim al-Shafi'i, Muhammad Tim al-Hanbali. And intisab, yes. But where might the layman actually struggle? As an example, someone comes and says, I am Abdullah al-Shafi'i. Hayyakallah ya Abdullah. It's lovely to meet you. Ya Abdullah, could you tell me one book that you have taken in the Shafi'i madhab? At least you took one book, right? At least you have one single source, Matan Abi Shuja'. At least you have one single source of the madhab. What do you mean? For the point is that a lot of people argue about things in this issue because basically they don't understand at all what the madhab is, or how to use it, or how to benefit from it, or they don't understand some of the masail within it. So they might confuse, for example, the issues of taqleed with the issue of, for example, intisab, attributing yourself to the madhab, or they might confuse taqleed, which is in reality a darura for many people, a necessity for many people, versus what some people call at-taqleedul a'ma, any absolute blind following to the point the person says, don't tell me the hadith, ana ala madhabi, I'm on my madhab. And they might confuse this issue. I'm not talking about what the ruling, we haven't covered the hukm yet. We're just talking about tasawwur. The person is shouting at someone, Wallah haram alayk, you are muqallid, this is evil, it didn't come in the Quran, it didn't come in the Sunnah, and they're fighting about it. And the person aslan doesn't differentiate between the types of taqleed. He didn't understand what taqleed is, he doesn't understand what ijtihad is, he doesn't understand the marahil, the stages a person goes through in their understanding of fiqh. So they're arguing about something asalatan, they don't understand it. So the first qa'idah we're going to take is al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurih. Until you understand what we're talking about, you won't be able to judge what is allowed and what is not allowed. The second principle, and I'm going to bring three, not two. The second principle that we're going to take is the principle that is mentioned in the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We made you into a middle ummah. A lot of people, when they heard Muhammad Tim Al-Hanbali is going to come here to our half Hanafi, half Shafi'i town, and he's going to tell us that you have to be la madhabiyya. You're not allowed to have a madhab. And he's going to take you away from what your fathers used to worship. And he's going to change the deen that you were taught. And on the other side, and there is the other side, also some messages going out. This Muhammad Tim, I heard him praise Abu Yusuf al-Qadi. I heard him say something good about Abu Yusuf al-Qadi, Sahib Abi Hanifa, rahimahumullah ta'ala. I don't think this brother is upon the sunnah. We see what? Ifratun wa tafrit. Exaggeration and extremism on both sides. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Allah gave us the kitab and the sunnah for us to be neither extreme on one side nor on the other. That doesn't mean in every mas'ala you go in the middle. Should a woman wear niqab or not? Halfway. Nah, it's not like that, right? But that's a misunderstanding, right? Mafhumun khati'. It's a misunderstanding that the meaning of wasatiyya is in the middle of everything. It's not in the middle of everything. But what it means is to be just and to be fair and not to be extreme. Because the thing that destroyed the people who came before you is al-ghuluw fi ad-din, being extreme in the religion. And also in this, sometimes when people make statements, you also have to contextualize the statements they make. You have to put the statement in context of where it came from. Some people live in a situation where a particular madhab fiqhi is associated with a particular madhab aqadi. A particular madhab in fiqh, Shafi'iyya, in this city, all of them are ... on this aqidah, of this aqidah. So people then confuse the two and they start to talk about the fiqhi madhab, the madhab in fiqh, as though it's a madhab in aqidah. Oh, those people, they are, those Shafi'iyah, ضالون مضلون. They misguide themselves, they misguide other people. Akhi, you're talking about aqidah. You mixed al-madhab al-aqadi wal-madhab al-fiqhi. You start talking about someone's belief, it doesn't go with you. You didn't talk about the issue of fiqh. So we must be just and fair. Just and fair. And this brings me to my third point. I was going to include in the second one, but I'm going to make it a clear third point. That our goal, bil ijma'. Muhammad Tim says what? Bil ijma'. Consensus. That the goal of a Muslim is to attach themselves to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the aqwal of the imma al-arba'ah, the four imams, on this topic is so much, it is mutawatira from them. It has been narrated from them from so many different people in so many different books, in so many different places, that the goal of the Muslim is to attach their heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. Now this doesn't mean I'm having a go at the Madahib Fiqhiyah. It doesn't have to be a Madhab Fiqhi. In anything that takes you, detaches you from the Kitab and the Sunnah, this is a problem. We are here to attach our hearts to the Quran and the Sunnah. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't send down the Maliki Madhab with Jibreel. He didn't. I'm going to vary the Madahib here so it doesn't say, you kept saying Hanafi, Shafi'i. He didn't send the Maliki Madhab with Jibreel. He didn't. Allah Azza wa Jal sent down the book of Allah and the Sunnah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Taraktu fikum shay'ain." I left among you two things. You will not be misguided. لَن تَضِلُّوا بَعْدِ. You will not be misguided after me as long as you hold on to them. Kitab Allahi wa sunnati. The book of Allah and the Sunnah. And I think everyone knows that the Madahib Fiqhiyya by name are not mentioned in the Quran, nor are they mentioned in the Sunnah. Sometimes you find funny things like statements about Umar ibn al-Khattab, and in the footnotes it says, perhaps he took the view of Imam al-Shafi'i. Ya salam. How did Umar take the view of Imam al-Shafi'i? Sometimes you find things like this. They don't mean he took it from Shafi'i, but they mean he took the same, istidlal, the same idea he took. But it's funny, you see, لعل Umar, perhaps Umar, أخذ برأي الشافعي, took the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i. This is somewhat impossible. The earliest of the four Imams died 150 after the Hijrah, right? Rahimahullah ta'ala. Up to, 250, whatever. So 150 to 250 years after the Hijrah, there was no, Umar never met لا أبا حنيفة ولا مالك ولا الشافعي ولا أحمد rahimahumullah ta'ala. So the point is, if we understand this issue nicely, we have a good tasawwur, and we are balanced in the sense we're just in the rulings of Islam, respectful to the scholars of Islam, but we're not shy to say that Allah Azza wa Jal sent down the Quran and the Sunnah. He didn't send down the Madahib al-Arba'ah. He sent down the Quran and the Sunnah. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Add to that Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali radiyallahu anhum, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ. Stick to my sunnah, the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashideen. Those Khulafa al-Rashideen didn't know any madhab of Abi Hanifa, wala Malik, wala Shafi'i, wala Ahmad. So the point is here, we're going to be just. We're not going to take away from our ulama. We're not going to detract from them, or to speak badly about them, or to detract from the khidmah that they did for the ummah. And honestly, I believe when you finish studying the Madahib Fiqhiyya, you're going to say, مَا أَعْظَمَ هَذِهِ الْخِدْمَةِ. What an amazing service these people did for the ummah. And they did an amazing service to the ummah. We're not going to take away from that. But we're not going to be shy in attaching people's hearts to the Quran and the Sunnah. As did who? Who did we take this from? Did we invent this ourselves? We took it from Al-Imam Abi Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Malik, al-Shafi'i and Ahmad. All of them kept saying to go to the Kitab and the Sunnah. We're going to bring some of the statements that they said with regard to attaching your heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. So this is important. So a person now, in summary, who studies a madhab fiqhi, and they do so while attaching their heart to the Quran and the Sunnah, then this person, inshaAllah ta'ala, has done, I don't even say they haven't done wrong, they've done well. He's done a good job to study the Madahib Fiqhiyya, murattaba, bit-tadarruj, in order, in stages, by taking the different topics of within the wider topic of fiqh, like fiqh, usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, al-furuq al-fiqhiyya, al-khilafiyat, all of these different topics we're going to talk about in fiqh. He takes them, and he takes them from a curriculum that is murattaba, it's ordered, and it is bit-tadarruj. It starts him off easy, then a little bit more, little bit more, little bit more. He's done great. But his heart is attached to what? What does he crave for? What does he hope for? What is he dreaming of at night? He's attached to his heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. He wants to obey Allah and obey the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u rasula wa ulil amri minkum. From the best of what is said about the word ulul amr is al-ulama wal-umara. They are the scholars and they are the leaders. Allah told us absolute obedience to Allah. absolute obedience to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for the ulama and the umara, the leaders and the scholars, the obedience to them is في ضوء طاعة لله وللرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم, in the light of your obedience to Allah and to His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is just a khulasa, like a little something just to get you started, so that the one who wants to run away, they can run, and the one who wants to stay, they can stay. But inshallah, yani this is the mukhtasar of what I want to share with you today. Khwani, let's talk very, very briefly. And the problem is, just my introduction to fiqh is like 24 hours long. No, that's really, it was 26 hours, something like that. So I'm gonna have to be like very summarized. The word fiqh, because we have to start with the tasawwur, right? We said before we understand the madhab, we have to have a tasawwur of what the madhab is. Somebody tell me what's a madhab. First of all, the madahib we're talking about are not to do with aqeedah, it's fiqh. So let's talk about fiqh. The first word, or the first meaning of the word fiqh, it is al-fahmu daqiq. It is to have detailed understanding. I don't like to say that it's just to have understanding. And some people say al-fiqh wa al-fahm. That's true, but in Arabic the words are different, right? We need to have something a bit more. Yani what makes the difference between understanding and fiqh? Why don't we call it the madahib of understanding? Why do we say fiqh? Because fiqh is about deep understanding. Ibn Faris rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, الفاء والقاف والهاء أصل واحد صحيح يدل على إدراك الشيء والعلم به ثم he said first of all, he said these three letters, fa and qaf and ha, they are a single root which tells you about understanding something and having knowledge of it. He said ثم اختص بذلك علم الشريعة. He said then it became used specifically for the Sharia. It became used specifically for the Sharia. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said وَالْفِقْهُ أَخَصُّ مِنَ الْفَهْمِ وَهُوَ فَهْمُ مُرَادِ الْمُتَكَلِّمِ مِنْ كَلَامِهِ. Fiqh is more specific than understanding. It means knowing what the person who is speaking, knowing what they want. Others said العلم المؤثر في النفس الدافع للعمل. It's the knowledge that affects you and impels you to act. And the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayra yufaqihu fid din." This is hadith in Bukhari and Muslim from the hadith of Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. Whoever Allah wants good for, He gives him fiqh, i.e. He gives him a detailed, deep understanding of the religion, or He gives him knowledge that he acts upon. Because that's, some of the scholars, they said the difference between understanding and fiqh is that fiqh is knowledge that you act upon, and fahm is just you know, like I know it's halal, but I know it's haram, but I still do it. But they said that fiqh, it means to really understand it properly. And that's why I want to quote a statement from Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, إِنَّمَا الْفَقِيهِ الَّذِي أَنْطَقَتْهُ الْخَشْيَةِ وَأَسْكَتَتْهُ الْخَشْيَةِ وَإِذَا قَالَ بِالْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ وَإِنْ قَالَ بِالْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ وَإِنْ سَكَتَ بِالْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ. He said the person who has fiqh, the faqih, is someone who the fear of Allah makes him speak and the fear of Allah makes him silent. When he speaks by the Quran and the Sunnah. And when he's silent because of the Quran and the Sunnah. And the Quran and Sunnah tell him to be silent. And if the matter becomes unclear to him, رَدَّهُ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِهِ, he brings it back to the person who knows it. And Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, مَعْرِفَةُ النَّفْسِ مَا لَهَا وَمَا عَلَيْهَا. Fiqh is to know yourself, what is counted for it and what is counted against it. We're going to come back to this because it is important. ما لها وما عليها. This is a very important stage in fiqh. Knowing what is in your favor and what is against you. As for the sort of technical definition of fiqh, so we understand what it is, there are many definitions and we don't have time to take all of them, but we could say al-ilmu bi-ahkam al-shari'ah al-amaliyah al-muktasaba min adillatiha al-tafsiliyah. It is to know the rulings of the sharia that relate to actions. Practical rulings. Why practical rulings? What other rulings are there in the sharia that are not amaliyah? For example, al-i'tiqad, for example, issues of what you believe, your belief, iman and things like that. Yes, you have to implement them and practice them, but these ahkam, they are ahkam al-sharia, and you could call them al-ilmiyah. And you have to know, and what is required from you is to know them, like Allah's names and attributes. What is required from you, that's why some of the scholars, they called it Tawheed, At-Tawheed al-Ilmi, or they called it Tawheed al-Ma'rifati wal-Ithbat. The Tawheed of knowing Allah and affirming who Allah is. That what is required from you is knowledge. Tayyib, there are some things, ahkam in Islam, there are some rulings that are related to the actions you do. How you pray and how you make wudu, and your transactions with people. But where are these rulings taken from? They could be taken from two places. They could be taken from al-adillah al-ijmaliyah, if that's the right term for it. They could be taken from adillah ijmaliyah, evidences which are general and summarized. For example, al-amru yufid al-wujub. Every command that comes in the Quran tells you that this thing is wajib. Allah said, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, perform the salah. You don't have to ask, is salah fard? Ask. Allah said, أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, salah is fard. Tayyib, what kind of evidence is this? It's an evidence which is ijmaliyah, it's generic. It's like, it can be used for many ayat, it can be used for salah, it can be used for wudu, it can be used for many different things. It can be used for mu'amalat, transactions, marriage, divorce, and it's like a principle in nature, and it covers all types of legislative rulings. Mostly we study this in usul al-fiqh. Mostly we study this in usul al-fiqh, most of the time. What we're looking for in fiqh, in the madhab fiqhi, generally speaking, is we are looking at, if we're talking about al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, the branches of fiqh, we're looking at al-adillatu tafsiliyya, specific ayat on specific topics, specific hadith on specific topics. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم. O you who believe, when you stand up to pray, wash your faces. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ, and your arms up to your elbows. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, and wipe over your heads. وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ, and wash your feet up to your ankles. Is this a generic evidence that's used in all areas of Sharia? No, it's a specific evidence that is used in what? In the issue of wudu, tahara. Maybe also you can bring it in the issue of salah. إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ, you have to stand up to pray. But generally this is tahara, salah is not something that's a principle you can apply to everything. So in general, and this is very summarized, it's not very detailed, it's not very, accurate in the sense of everything. But generally speaking, usul al-fiqh deals with the generic stuff, deals with the overriding principles. You can think of usul al-fiqh as a toolkit by which you extract rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah and any of the other evidences in Islam. As for al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, what we call the branches of fiqh, or we call it fiqh itself, we're dealing with specific issues in specific things. We're not dealing with aqeedah because we said al-ahkam al-amaliyya, or the madahib fiqhiyya have nothing to say about aqeedah generally speaking. The Islam, the sciences of Islam are mutadakhila, right? You can't separate and say, I'm only ever going to study fiqh and I'm never going to study usul fiqh. A'udhu billah. Never going to take it. And you can't do that because fiqh, in usul, everything goes together, right? You can't say, I'm going to study fiqh and I will never look at anything in the seerah. Because by default, you're going to come across things that are also in the seerah and you can't escape it. But in general, al-madahib al-fiqhiyya, they do not deal with masail al-i'tiqad. They don't deal with anything related to aqeedah. They deal with al-ahkam al-amaliyya, the practical legislative rulings. There are lots of sciences within that are encompassed within the madhab, or within the, you can call them branches of fiqh. In other words, what would we call them? We in our institute, we call it masarul fiqhi wa usulihi. Like the path of studying fiqh has many sciences within it. And generally, I'm just going to talk to you about maybe 4 or 5 of them. So again, we have a good tasawwur of what you would expect to find in the madhab. So no doubt, fiqh requires all of the sciences of Islam. You have to have tafsir, you have to have good Arabic language, you have to have knowledge of hadeeth, what is authentic, what is not. You need all of it, right? To issue a ruling in Islam or study a ruling in Islam, you need to know all of the ahkam of fiqh, right? And the funun of Islam. You need to know about tafsir, you need to know hadith, you need to know seerah, you need to know Arabic language. But these typically are dealt with outside of the madhab. Why? Because pretty much they are dealt with together. In other words, it doesn't matter what madhab you are taking, what curriculum you are taking, you're still studying the same book of Arabic language, or to a greater or lesser extent. But what are the sciences that the madhab got involved in? That's my question. So the madhab doesn't really get involved in Arabic. You don't get like Hanafi Arabic, Maliki Arabic, Shafii Arabic. A little bit in usul al-fiqh maybe, but this is like dilalatul alfaz, what do words mean and things like that. You don't really get that. You don't really get tafsir. You don't get Hanafi tafsir and Shafi'i. Yes, you might get a mufassir who attributes themselves to the Shafi'i madhab, no problem. But you don't get necessarily a madhab that teaches you, a madhab fiqhi that teaches you tafsir. Allahumma, unless we're talking about tafsir al-ahkam, the rulings of the ahkam of the Quran, then in this case, yes, because it's fiqh basically. The person is going to teach you fiqh from the Quran. So they might teach you fiqh from the Quran upon the madhab of al-Imam Malik, fiqh from the Quran upon the madhab of al-Imam al-Shafi'i, for example, like that. But in general, hadith also, yes, certain scholars of hadith were Hanafi, others were Shafi'i, others were Maliki, others were Hanbali. But in general, it's not like the Hanafis don't take from Musnad al-Imam Ahmed, right? We can't, don't tell, la tahadithni min Musnad. I don't take anything from that Musnad. It's a Hanbali Musnad. They don't take it like that, right? It's outside of the madhab. Is that clear? Those topics, hadith, tafsir, seerah, ulum al-Arabiyyah, they are not, yes, the authors might be attributed to a madhab, but generally speaking, those books are not taught as part of the madhab fiqhi, so to speak. Does that mean the madhab fiqhi doesn't affect them? No, it does. It does affect them. Many times it does. In tafsir, you see an author who is Shafi'i. Go to the ayah, أَوْلَا مَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءِ. You touched a woman. What you're going to see? You're going to see this author, usually, he's going to support and use this ayah to validate the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala regarding breaking the wudu when you touch a woman who is ajnabiyah, for example. So here, yes, it's going to affect what people write, but you don't go and study a madhab fiqhi and sit studying tafsir al-Tabari. What do you study inside the madhab? There are actually lots, but I'm just going to talk about talk about 6, 7, 8 topics that are typically taught. The first one is what we call al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, the branches of fiqh. And this furu' fiqhiyya is what people call fiqh. Yani they sometimes summarize it and call it fiqh. Yani I'm looking at al-adillatu tafsiliyya. I want wudu, how do I do it? I want to know how to make tahara. I want to know about marriage, divorce. Okay, al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, how is it organized? It's organized by dividing it typically into two, into ibadat and mu'amalat. Ibadat are acts of worship, mu'amalat are dealings and transactions. So in mu'amalat you find buying and selling, you find nikah, you find divorce, and in mu'amalat you find, in ibadat you find about prayer and you find about. So generally the ibadat, what do you expect to find in there? You expect to find the 4 pillars of Islam minus the first one, because the first one is Aqidah. So you're going to find as-salah, you're going to find zakah, you're going to find sawm, fasting, you're going to find hajj. Also usually, but not in every madhab, but usually you're going to find jihad also in ibadat. Some of them put it in mu'amalat. I'll be honest, I don't know in the books of the Ahnaf where they put it, but in some of the Shafi'iyya you see sometimes they put it in. Usually they put it in ibadat, an act of worship, but sometimes they put it in mu'amalat. Because it has an aspect of both. Like you're talking about, there are aspects of dealings with people and there are aspects of worship. In the issue of mu'amalat, you're going to find all the things that represent interactions between people. So you're going to find nikah, talaq, al-bay', buying, selling, marriage, divorce. And later on, some of them make it a third category. Some of them don't break it into two. Some of them put in the third one, they put al-hudud wa jinayat, punishments and crimes and punishments. And some of them put crimes and punishments, just they add it in the end, and some of them separate. Different madahib, different authors within the madhab have there. But generally you're going to find acts of worship, you're going to find dealings, and maybe at the end you're going to find crime and punishment. That's what you're going to find in there. This is al-furu' al-fiqhiyya. In other words, what people call fiqh. Then we come to usul al-fiqh. We said usul al-fiqh, it deals with al-adillatul ijmaliyya. It deals with generic tools, which are evidences that can be used across the whole of the Quran and the Sunnah. Like we mentioned, al-amru yufid al-wujub. When you receive a command from Allah, the basic principle is that this command is fardun wajib upon you. It's fardun wajib upon you. Quick benefit on fard and wajib. There are istilahat, right? And this is actually a topic within the broader topic of fiqh, is you should take tarikh al-madhab wa istilah al-madhab. You should take the terminology of the madhab. For example, what does the word wajib mean in the books of the Ahnaf? It's slightly different to the word wajib in the books of what they sometimes call the Jumhur, the other three. Because generally in usul they tend to be somewhat close to each other. The Maliki, Shafii and Hanabila, they tend to use each other's books in usul, and they tend to. So the point is that the word might mean something different. So someone comes and says to you, for example, 2 rak'at before Fajr is wajib. First you need to understand, sorry, 1 second, what do you mean by wajib? Yeah? Is it fard? Is it sunnah mu'akkada? And so the point is you need to know your terminologies, because you are going to get confused by the term wajib. Then make it even more complicated. Some of the madahib, especially the Hanabila, they might use the word wajib differently depending on what they're talking about. So for example, in Hajj, when they talk about something that is wajib, and the difference between al-rukn, al-arkan wal-wajibat, the things that you cannot make up for, and if you leave them you messed it up, and your ibadah is cancelled, and the things that you can make up for example. So there are all kinds of terminologies you should get used to, and that is its own topic. They sometimes call it istilahat. al-madhab, or sometimes they call it tarikh al-madhab, the history of the madhab, so you know, because it changes. This scholar, the early scholar, he uses this terminology. Have you ever seen, for example, the early Shafi'iyya, when they use the word makruh, most of the time they mean haram. Vast majority of the time when they use the word makruh, they mean haram. But their terminology is, so they'll say like, zina is makruh. They don't mean makruh, yani, that if you do it, you don't get punished. So the point is that the word terminology could be different depending on the sheikh, depending on the time, depending on the book, and so on. From the sciences that we study within the science of fiqh is we study al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyah, the principles of fiqh. So now we're taking principles, qawa'id, generic principles that we can apply, but they are fiqh principles, and sometimes they call them qawa'id usuliyah because they sometimes argue, does this principle, is it really fiqh, or have you just stolen it from usul al-fiqh and put it in there? It happens sometimes. So you've got principles and rules you're learning. You've also got what some of them call, for example, tabaqatul ashab. Learning all the different people in the madhab. Who were they? For example, the madhab started with the imam. And this is a big misconception. Many people think that the madhab, for example, of Malik, is the opinions of Imam Malik. This is a misconception. Strike it out, cross it off. It's not even close. The madhab is attributed to the imam, but in reality, the madhab goes through marahil and tabaqat. For example, I give you a simple example. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, has two very famous students, right? Qadi Abu Yusuf and Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, rahimahumullah ta'ala. Tayyib. Abu Hanifa has opinions and they took it from him. But then Abu Yusuf comes and makes different opinions to the opinions of Abu Hanifa. He comes across a hadith, or he looks at the issue again and he changes his opinion. Then later on, this is just at-tabaqatul ula, the first level. Then comes another, then comes another, then comes another and another. And each one, the madhab is growing. Yes, not every person is so influential. For example, if we look at the Shafi'i madhab, the first thing we have is Imam al-Shafi'i split his life in two parts. Al-madhab al-qadim and al-madhab al-jadid. He has his old madhab and his new madhab. So al-Shafi'i is changing his madhab halfway through. So they'll sometimes say, وَفِي الْقَدِيمِ, yani in the old madhab he had this opinion, and in the new madhab he had this opinion. Then you have certain immense, great scholars who came, maybe way later in time. And those scholars were so influential that the madhab almost become a second imam for the madhab. For example, in the madhab al-Shafi, al-Rafi'i, and al-Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala. In the Hanbali madhab, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. Ibn Taymiyyah comes and he just, alas, a third of the madhab is gone. We brought a different aqwal now. The point is, the madhab is a living thing. It's not Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad. It's them and their students and their students' students and their students' students and these key figures that come along. And then people will criticize you, you took the Hanbali madhab, but you took it from Siraat-al-Mustaqeem. And Siraat-al-Mustaqeem, it has a mail ila aqwal Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Yani it goes towards Ibn Taymiyyah's preferences in the madhab, yani what he preferred. And you're not traditional, you need to go to al-Hajawi, or you need to go to, for example, the Maqdisiyin. You need to go to al-Muwaffaq ibn Qudamah, and you need to take his books because you've gone and you've just, So the point is, the madhab is living. There's people coming all the time that are reviewing, and there's ikhtilaf inside the madhab. That's the next misconception, that the madhab is one qawl. Inside the madhab, you have these hundreds, if not thousands of scholars Of course they don't agree on everything. And so you have ikhtilaf, and often the ikhtilaf is again brought back to key figures. For example, whose opinion do you take in this? Are you taking the qawl of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah in this issue, or are you going with the traditional qawl in the madhab that was before that? Which one are you taking? So this is important, Ikhwani. We know that the madhab, it doesn't stay stale. In fact, any madhab that stayed stale, the madhab died. Hold on, the madhab died? Does that mean there were more than 4 madahib? Ikhwani, the number of madahib fiqhiyya, no one can count it except Allah. Because in the beginning, we're going to cover the history. In the beginning, people had many scholars they went to, and people were taking from Al-Awza'i, and people were taking from many different scholars. It wasn't like everyone in the world was going to those 4 imams and their students. They weren't in the beginning. They had many different scholars, and those scholars went outside of the madhab. And some of the madahib kind of stayed semi-famous, like al-Zahiriyya. Ibn Hazm kind of revived the madhab of Dawood al-Zahiri. Rahimallahu Jami'. Ibn Hazm really, he like by himself, he took that madhab and he made it a 5th madhab. The point is, the madahib were many madahib. So if we ask ourselves a question, what made these 4 madahib last the test of time? We said it's not that Jibreel brought them down. What made them last the test of time? Now we're starting to get to the heart of the matter. The first thing is the khidmah that the students did for the madhab. The students did such a service to it. They wrote down what their shaykh said. It said Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala never wrote a book. It said that he didn't write a book in Aqeedah or in Fiqh, and some of them attributed al-Fiqh al-Akbar to him, and some of them said it's still his students. His students wrote. The shaykh said, this is the opinion of our shaykh. Shafii wrote, but again, he didn't write in Fiqh. He wrote in Usul, he has Risala, Al-Umm, but he didn't write in Fiqh itself. His students came along and they wrote for him. They did khidmah. Also, these madahib, they are in general, they are shamila, they cover all of the aspects of fiqh, all of the abwab of fiqh. Some of the scholars have opinions in some topics, but they don't have opinions in others. For example, the early tabi'een, the great scholars of the early tabi'een, you don't find them having an opinion in all of the abwab of fiqh, like, can I gather together the opinions? Even a sahabi like Abdullah ibn Abbas or Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, you cannot find for them an opinion in every single topic from the topics of fiqh. That's the second reason. The third reason is that fiqh is not one science. We said fiqh is a collection of sciences. We talked about usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. We talked about al-jam'u wal-farq, looking at the issues that appear to be similar but in fact are different, or issues where the same evidence is used and they're 2 different rulings and things like that. Al-khilafiyat, the differences within the madhab and outside of the madhab. So now once you've taken, you're like an expert, like they say, sahib or nafas al-shafi'i, your blood is Shafi'i. And then you come and say, what now do you do? Now you need to know the khilaf that happened between Abi Hanifa and al-Shafi'i generally, because the other madahib there is khilaf, but it's, you can say a lot of it came between Imam Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala and Imam al-Shafi'i. So now, as in the madhab, not the imam, but the madhab. So now you're an expert in the Shafi'i madhab. You breathe Shafi'i madhab, and you know Shafi'i madhab like you dream it at night. But now you need to know the issues in which the Shafi'iyya and the Hanafiyya differed. So now you can understand the points where Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala was correct and the madhab al-Shafi'i is wrong. And yes, it happened. And many times Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala takes, and he goes back and he takes, for example, the opinion of Abu Hanifa in a matter, and he says, this is the madhab now. And he imported it into the Hanbali madhab. Why? All of this is because they're looking for the truth attached to the Quran and the Sunnah, and now you've taken, you know your madhab, but now you've got to go outside, khilafiyat. What's the difference between this madhab and why, what caused it, and so on. On top of that, you also you study, for example, al-fatawa wa tanzil. You study the issue of fatawa. So you listen to the sheikhs of the madhab, because now I've just studied theory. You know, okay, I'm really good. I know all Shafi'i books. I memorized Minhaj, and I started reading Al-Majmu' and I'm just, I know Shafi'i madhab. But now there's a problem. I'm not a mujtahid, alim. I'm not a great scholar who's qualified to do ijtihad. So what do I need to do if I want to be competent in my fiqh? I need to now read the fatawa of the great scholars of Islam. So now those great scholars, what did they give as their fatawa? Because remember, a fatwa isn't really in the topic of al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, to be honest. It doesn't come under fiqh really. A fatwa is implementing fiqh upon the real world now. And usul al-fiqh and qawa'id fiqhiyya and all these sciences, now implement it for me. Real life. Someone comes and says, Ya Shaykh, I said to my wife, taliqa, 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 you're divorced, divorced, divorced. Ya Shaykh, am I divorced or I'm not divorced? Tayyib, I know the madhab, I know the qawl in the madhab, I know the usul, I know the qawa'id. But now I need to see the shaykh. When people came to him, what did the shaykh give the fatwa for it? Okay, what did you see about these sciences? Don't you see that they all go together? Could you imagine? Now sometimes people talk about, are you allowed to go out of your madhab? Could you imagine, generally speaking, if in the first day you started studying, you took the usul of Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, and you took the fatawa of Al-Qadi Hussein from the Shafi'iyya, for example, and you took Siraat-al-Mustaqeem from the Hanabila in your Furu' Fiqhiyya, and then you went and took Maraqi Su'ud, the Nazm of Jam' al-Jawami' and the Maliki poet who wrote it. You are going to be, my brother, lost. Waqi', I'm not talking about what's allowed, not allowed. You are going to try it. You're going to be so lost. You're not going to know where you are, because this doesn't match with this, doesn't match with this. It doesn't. Yes, they're all taken from the Quran and the Sunnah, no doubt, but they have things that are consistent. So one of the great benefits and blessings of the madhab is what? Consistency. Not always truly consistent, but as much as you can. The person talking to you about usul is taking fiqh from the same book as you. The person talking to you about qawa'id fiqhiyya is taking it from the same imams, not imam, because not one imam, the same a'imma as you. So you end up with something that is like a consistent curriculum that you can actually follow. Now my brothers, I want to highlight a point here. We are not, until this point, talking about ammat al-muslimin, the regular folk, al-awam. We're talking about studying the madhab now. Like, did you ever see a Ammi who studied, al-jam'u al-farq, and like the differences in the opinions and khilafiyat between Abi Hanifa and Shafi'i? Nobody, no one from the regular Muslim studied this, right? But the people who are students of knowledge, is very, very hard. Two things are very hard. And I'm not shy. I'm going to get in trouble for saying it, but I'm not shy. It's two things are very, very hard. One is, it's very, very hard to do this without a madhab. Saraha. Yes, were there people who did it without a madhab? Yes. Historically, don't shoot the messenger. Yani. Historically, there were people, and a significant group of people, who said, we do not need this curriculum. We don't need these books. I'm going to go to the Quran, and I'm going to go to the Sunnah, and I'm going to go to the statements of the scholars in general, and I'm going to gather this knowledge. But the problem is, you're going to gather it in what? Al-furu' al-fiqhiyya, usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, al-jam'u al-farq, al-khilafiyat, and you're going to take all of that stuff. And you're going to find it to be a lot of effort. And in the end, are you really going to produce something better than what is in the four madahib when you went yourself and you did what they did? You didn't do anything else. Don't think I went and I took the sunnah. You didn't. You just went and tried the same thing that they did. And you produced your curriculum, Muhammad Tim's curriculum. La madhabiyya, don't take your madhab. He took it from the kitab and the sunnah. You're going to find it ad'af, weaker than any of the madahib al-fiqhiyya. So it's very, very hard. People did it. Ibn Hazm, he supported it. Shawkani rahimahullah ta'ala supported it. Others, sometimes ashab al-madhab even. People from the madhab sometimes, really, people from each of the four madahib who became, those are the ones that, they get in trouble. They drifted away from the concept of the madhab. And they said, no, this has just gone too far. I want the people to go to the kitab and the sunnah. But generally speaking, it is hard and it's a lot of effort for very little gain. Is it possible? Ikhwani, I'm going to upset a whole bunch of other people as well. It has to be possible. It has to be qat'an, it has to be possible. Because otherwise, the luzum of that qawl is that Allah sent you down the Quran and gave you the sunnah and it's not enough for you. And that is qawlun batil. We believe that is absolutely false. You cannot say that Allah gave the Quran and the Sunnah and the Quran and the Sunnah are not enough for us. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Allahumma, unless you say one thing, the only argument you can bring, and people brought this argument by the way. Ibn Rajab famously, rahimahullah ta'ala, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he wrote a book where he staunchly defended you have to choose one of the four madahib. Lekin this, sarahatan, it has problems with it. And one of the problems is that it has lawazim, it has consequences to it. So the reality is the Quran and the Sunnah have to be enough. But also the only real argument you could give is if there was ijma' upon taking from the four madahib. And if there's ijma' that you're not allowed to go outside, and there is not ijma' on this. And I don't think even the most staunch follower of a madhab can argue that there is ijma' on this issue. Al-khilafu fihi mawjood. There is khilaf, there are scholars from all of the madahib who went further, deeper. So in reality, you don't have la ayah, wala hadith, wala ijma'. You don't have a ayah, nor do you have a hadith, nor do you have ijma'. Ibn Rajab proves this. He brings what? Qiyas. Ibn Rajab in his risala, where he tells you have to be one of the four madahib, his qiyas is upon the qira'at al-saba'. And you have to read a qira'ah from the qira'at. You have to read a qira'ah from the qira'at, so you have to take a madhab. This is qiyas ma'al fariq. Qiyas doesn't stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever. Rahimahullah ta'ala, the great Imam, Imam Hafiz, Ibn Rajab. It's an amazing book, wallah. But in reality, the argument is, look, I don't have la ayah, wala hadith, wala ijma'. I don't have a ayah or hadith or ijma'. So it comes to like qiyas and, trying to prove something. And so in reality, I don't believe it is impossible for a person to have a tafaqquh without a madhab. But it's extremely hard and very, very few people did it. Very few people achieved it. And in general, very, very few people achieved this issue of getting tafaqquh, even those who supported it. Shaykhuna Shaykh Nasir al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, we know Shaykh Nasir, right? His introduction to Sifat Salat al-Nabi and how he take it from the Kitab and the Sunnah. Actually, Shaykh Nasir rahmatullahi alayh came from studying the Hanafi madhab rahimahullah ta'ala. I'm not saying that the Shaykh would not have achieved what he achieved, but the point is that it's not easy to get that tafaqquh, that without starting off with a curriculum. So what I'm here to say to you is that the madhab, ikhwani, it is a curriculum for studying fiqh and the sciences connected to fiqh. That's what it is. It's not wahi. Jibreel didn't bring it down. It's not ma'soom. It's not a matter that I don't pray in a Hanafi masjid and I don't marry a Shafi'i woman. This is how that when we hear the history of the madahib, it got to this point. وصل إلى درجة والله العظيم. There were 4 jama'at around the Kaaba, one Hanafi, one Maliki, one Shafi'i, one Hanbali. You're not allowed to go and pray behind the other one. What is this? What religion is this? I don't know this from Islam. But to understand the madhab as a curriculum which gives you a curriculum that is consistent, 3 things it's going to give you. A curriculum that is consistent, meaning that it's going to match I open the book of Usul, yeah, that's the same as what I found there. The book of Qawaid, yeah, I found that there. It's going to match. Not completely, because we have ikhtilaf in the madhab, but it's going to match, roughly. The second thing is that it is tried and tested. And this is a good argument Ibn Rajab makes, and this is a true argument. And it is tried and tested. And it's you don't need to go and reinvent the wheel. And it's tried and it's tested. Many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people studied the books, graduated, got the fiqh, went on, alhamdulillah. Jameel. It's tried and tested. So it's consistent and it's tried and tested, and it goes with stages. It has gradual progression in it. So I can take a basic book in the madhab. For the Shafi'iyya, for example, I can start in Furu' al-Fiqhiyya with Matan Abi Shuja'. Then I can take for example, before Az-Zubad, I could take Az-Zubad after that. I could take Al-Yaqut al-Nafis before that. Then I could take Az-Zubad. Then I could take Umdat al-Salik. And then I can take Al-Minhaj. Each one of them gets a little bit more difficult. And there's things I can memorize. Az-Zubad is a manzuma, right? I can memorize the poetry for it. And then when I take the usul, I start with Al-Waraqat, Shafi'i author. I then go to, for example, before that, even if you end up with Fiqh al-Birmawi or something like that, and you ended up with Shafi'i, consistent, it's all matching up for me. Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, take the same thing, and then Tabaqat al-Ashab, everything like that. So it's nice and consistent. It's going to take me in stages, and it's going to be tried and tested. But just like the madhab has many benefits, just like it has fawaid, many benefits, and it's a great blessing, there are also harms for the person who doesn't use it properly. From among the harms for the person who doesn't use it properly is al-i'rad an al-kitab wa sunnah, leaving the Quran and the Sunnah. And by that I mean rejecting even a hadith, or turning away from it, or this ta'assub, like extremism with regard to holding on to the madhab. Like we said, 4 jama'at, we don't pray with you, you can't marry this one, and you're not allowed to pray in the masjid of this person, and this kind of stuff. This was never present in the time of the 4 Imams. Rather, it was probably even 500, 600 years after the hijrah to a certain extent. Maybe before that there was some where you started to have real ta'assub in the madhab. You started to have real differences of opinion after the time of the tabi'een and then onwards. So you can say that until the middle of the 200s after the hijrah, you didn't really have any ta'assub madhabi, like extremism in following the madhab. That's why you see the imams are telling you, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, if the hadith is authentic, it's my madhab. Don't take from me, but look from where I took. All of these things are coming from the imams. So until about 250 years after the hijrah, you really don't have ta'assub. What causes the madhab to spread? To be honest, what causes the madhab to spread in reality is siyasa, politics. That's a fact, historical fact. What causes a madhab to spread is nothing other than politics. It's not this madhab was stronger, this madhab was weaker. Al-Imam al-Bukhari, can you imagine if his madhab was collected and documented? The madhab of al-Bukhari. Some of them call it madhab Ahl al-Hadith. And it's the fiqhi madhab of Ahl al-Hadith, some of them call it like that. But in reality, the reason a madhab became popular is because of politics. Someone was appointed chief judge, for example, Abu Yusuf, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his time was appointed the chief judge. Now as the chief judge, he appoints all the other judges. He's appointing Hanafi jurists, of course. So now the Hanafi madhab spreads because those in authority have appointed the senior judges Hanafi, and he appoints his Hanafi judges to go with him, and then the madhab spreads. And then what happens 200 years later, you see the Shafi'i madhab in that country all over the place. What happened? Politics. Somebody changed position, he got taken out, someone died, someone else got put in, he chose the Shafi'i jurist. Now the Amir of that mantiqa, the Amir of that area tells everyone, you have to be Shafi'i, we're only doing qada, we're only doing judgments upon the Shafi'i madhab. So now the Shafi'i madhab spreads. And that's why if you look at the world today, recently, the Ottoman Empire, relatively recently, imposed the Hanafi madhab upon the courts, right? And so all of the countries that were under Ottoman rule, by and large, all of them had the Hanafi madhab. When Saudi was formed, Saudi Arabia was formed, again, the judges were from the Hanbali madhab. The Saudis are not that much of a fan of this whole no madhab thing. They're not on that. That comes from the Ahlul Hadith in like, for example, in India, some of them really supported it and stuff like that. But in terms of like, they're not a great fan of it. So they implemented Hanbali fiqh in the courts. Now when you go to Saudi, try to find someone who is teaching Matan Abi Shuja'. You look from the top to the bottom, you find some guy hiding in the corner. Like, don't tell anybody. Siraat-al-Mustaqeem, Al-Mukhtasarat, and Kafi al-Mubtadi, and they're teaching, they became the madhab in the country. Yes, there are people, alhamdulillah, there are people teaching the Haramain, other madahib and things like that, but it's not widespread. Likewise, you look at the spread of the Maliki madhab in northern Africa. Many of those countries were Hanafi before that. What happened? Did they realize the Maliki madhab is much better? Or they got free copies of the Muwatta? No, it's not like that. They don't actually use the Muwatta, to be honest with you. They don't really refer to the Muwatta, which is a shame, because the Muwatta is an amazing book, but they don't really have a lot of attachment to it. But it wasn't that they got given out free copies of the Muwatta or something like that. It's quite simple. The politics changed, the judges changed, the Sultan changed, and the Maliki madhab spreads. It's very rare, I can't say never, but it's very, very rare that a madhab spreads because of its virtue or because of the quality of the teaching. Most of the time it spreads because of politics. Because somebody got appointed as a judge, one of the Sultan, he says that you have to follow this madhab, and it becomes taught to the people, and it becomes widely spread. There could be, of course, لِكُلِّ قَاعِدَةٍ إِسْتِثْنَاء, every principle has an exception. Yeah, for sure, you do find, وَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدِ, times where a madhab is spread because people love the books and they became accustomed to it and so on. Yeah, you find that. For example, the spread of the Hanbali madhab, not that I'm defending my madhab, the spread of the Hanbali madhab in Damascus, in the Al-Madrasat al-Umari at the Ibn Qudama, Muwaffaq ibn Qudama and Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, there was no sultan there. There was no sultan who enforced it. The Qadi was Shafii, Ibn Abi Usrun. He was a Shafii, rahimahullah ta'ala, the chief justice of the region. And the courts were Shafii. But when the Shaykh started teaching, a great alim with great knowledge, and he started writing books, so people came and learned the madhab. And it does spread through the quality of teaching sometimes. We don't say the quality of the madhab, but the quality of the teaching, and it does spread sometimes. Now, a lot of Hanbali madhab, a lot of it spread around the world simply because of, for example, a lot of people graduating from Saudi universities. It's not a bad thing, and it's nothing wrong with it. It's a historical fact. People graduated from universities, and they came, and when they teach their classes, they teach what they know. They teach what their teacher taught them. They teach the Hanbali madhab, and so it spread kind of online and things like that. So you do get the madhab sometimes spread because of teaching quality or availability of teachers, but a lot of time, particularly in the past, it was closely affiliated with politics, and who got appointed and who didn't, and who was in favor with the sultan and who didn't. And that's why it even reached a very silly phase. Honestly, it really did. A really, not praiseworthy face, where the Sultan, for example, would bring the people to make fun of each other, like the Madahib, to attack each other for entertainment. So they would give you a mas'ala that is like really, really like, it's extremely hard to understand the reality of it. They would give a mas'ala, or they would give something that it's hard to understand, or something like really impossible to exist. They said like really silly things, like if a person breaks wind and they had something there, and then their wudu break when they open this thing, or they brought like just things that don't have any practical, it doesn't exist, it doesn't, but they brought it. Why? We bring, on the right hand side we have the noble Ahnaf, and on the left hand side we have the noble Shafi'iyya. Yalla, let's see, fight it out with each other. But it wasn't praiseworthy. It wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And none of the scholars of Islam and the scholars of those madahib who were upon the Quran and the Sunnah, they didn't praise it. It was just people just arguing, like jadal, and just going back and forward. وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. Many times people just argue, and then they started to attack each other. And this is not what Islam was about, and it's not why the madhab was formed. And that's why this ta'assub, it came from around that stage. It came after 250 after the Hijrah, when the book started to be written. And of course, when you write an opinion, and then someone across the road writes a different opinion, you get a little riled up. You start to write a refutation of what they said, right? This guy is jahil, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And you write and you defend yourself. And then the other person comes and they defend. And so, okay, in the beginning, even 300, 400, it's okay. People, there's a little bit of stubbornness. There's a little bit of like, this is my madhab and don't talk to me. But it's not as bad until it gets to the stage where it becomes just partisanship, hizbiyah, if the word is the right, forming sects, and sectarianism and partisanship and ta'assub and blindness, and just everybody attacking each other and nobody respecting the Quran and the Sunnah before respecting the Imams. And this came, particularly, you can say it got worse from the fall of Baghdad. From 656 after the Hijrah or something like that. It really became like worse and worse and worse. I just want to talk about, and I need to take a break because 3 o'clock we need to give you guys a break. We've been sitting for a long time. I just want to talk about one faida, or one benefit here. And this is, why do people differ? Because this is another thing we as Muslims, we really struggle with. Ikhtilaf, or al-khilaf wal-ikhtilaf. Some of them said al-khilaf is mamduh and al-ikhtilaf is madmum. Some of them said this, that the word khilaf just means, we didn't see quite the same way, and it's not necessarily blameworthy, but ikhtilaf, we went head on. Some of them said this, but in any case, there are 3 basic reasons why we have differences of opinion. The first one is the textual evidence, a difference in the actual evidence that we're going back to. Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions in Jumma'ul Ilm, nobody has memorized all of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we know, if we just look at the hadith that were narrated, not memorized but narrated, we see that, for example, in general, Imam Abu Hanifa, he was considered to be muqil. And it's not correct to say that he was da'if al-hadith. I don't believe it's correct to say that he was weak in hadith. I think this is not correct. I don't think there's an evidence for it. Rather, he was muqil, and he didn't narrate a lot of hadith. And he didn't narrate large volumes and volumes and volumes of hadith, generally speaking. How many hadith he knew? Al-ilmu indallah. But he didn't narrate lots and lots and lots of hadith. Some of them were rough on him. They said da'if al-hadith, he wasn't strong. But it's not the reason. He was muqil, and he didn't have so many hadith that he narrated. And there's nothing wrong with that. The second is, for example, Al-Imam Malik, we have Al-Muwatta. Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i is considered to be, and Imam Malik and himself, if you look at Ahmad and Al-Shafi'i and Malik, this is considered to be a silsila dhahabiyya in ilm al-hadith. Yani the highest standard of hadith is a hadith narrated by Ahmad, from Al-Shafi'i, from Malik, from Nafi', from Abdullah ibn Umar. They say, radiyallahu anhuma, they say this is the highest standard of hadith that exists. So they were mukthirun, and they said Imam Ahmad memorized alfi hadith, 1,000,000 hadith. And they were busy narrating hadith and going back and forward with hadith. They were busy with it. Not everybody has all of the hadith. Not Al-Imam Ahmad and not everybody else. That's why Imam Al-Shafi'i says to Imam Ahmad, you are more knowledgeable about hadith than me. So when you have a hadith, inform me about it, whether it is from Iraq or from Sham. Tell me about this hadith. Give me this hadith. If you know a hadith, give it to me. I haven't memorized every single hadith. Remember, when did Imam al-Bukhari write his Sahih? Imam al-Bukhari died 256 after the Hijrah, right? Generally, the books of hadith, apart from the Muwatta, Imam Malik is 190, whatever. Imam Malik of the Muwatta, the Kutub al-Sitta, all of them are written around this time, in the 200s, mid 200s, or the early to mid 200s after the Hijrah, and 240, 250, whatever. They're written at this time. That means that in general, neither did Imam Abu Hanifa, nor did Imam Malik, nor did really Shafi'i and Ahmad, because they are the ones Bukhari is narrating from, not the ones that none of them had, Bukhari and Muslim and Abu Dawud, Nasai, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Rasat looking through it and saying, okay, this is my madhab from this hadith. They traveled, they memorized, they took narrations, they reported them, they tried their best. So this is the first reason you have ikhtilaf. One person knows a hadith, one person doesn't. And there's a misconception here which a lot of people have. And this misconception is, they think that it's impossible to know where your imam got his hukm from. This is ajib, yani. Like the books of the madhab are not like this, ikhwan. They are not. Generally, you go through and studying fiqh, you start off at marhalat al-ta'sis. Somebody just tells you, look, you pray like this. Put your hands on your chest, put your hands on your navel, whatever it is. Just your teacher says, this is where you put your hands. Khalas. Come tomorrow. Then you come to marhalat al-tadleel. Now your teacher says, put your hands on your chest because of the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr. Someone else comes and says da'if, but that's coming later. But the point is, someone says, put your hands on your chest because of the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr. Now we have, radiyallahu anhu, now we have the hukm and we have the dalil. But the dalil on its own is not enough. Let me give you a beautiful example. It's my favorite example. I'm going to tell you, my brothers, a dalil. I'm going to talk about the issue, a very controversial issue. I'm going to talk about rafa' al-yadayn, raising your hands in the prayer. I'm going to give you a dalil. Now pay attention to this dalil. أَفَلَا يَنظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Don't they see the camel, how it was created? Is that not a dalil? Is it not an ayah? You say, Akhi Muhammad, I'm sorry. You brought me a dalil, but it's got nothing to do at all with rafa' al-yadayn. It's not even, it has no connection to it at all. So you brought me a dalil, but what's the problem here? I say, listen, Akhi, you asked me for a dalil and I gave you a dalil. You asked me for an ayah, a hadith, ijma, I brought you an ayah. What's your problem? You say, hold on, the problem here is what we call wajhul istidlal. How the person uses the dalil. Sah? How did this person, he got the dalil, but he used the dalil wrong. This dalil has no connection to the issue of rafa' al-yadayn, not for it, not against it. It has no connection to it at all. It could be a dalil for something else, but it's not a dalil for what we're talking about. So the problem here is the usage of the dalil is wrong. You then come to a stage which we might call marhalat tahrir, where you start to, or before that, maybe before that, you come to a stage of what they sometimes call al-muqaran or al-muqarana, the issue of comparing other people's opinions. So now I got dalil. Okay, you with me? I've got dalil. I've got a qawl, I've got a dalil. I've got a qawl, I've got a dalil. I've taken a qawl in the issue of Raf' al-Yadayn. The fact that Abdullah ibn Umar, it's reported that he left it after he started it. And that people accompanied him for a year and they never saw him raising his hands. طيب. There's dalil, صح? Dalil. Wajh al-istidlal is correct, right? I used it, we used it with a valid dalil for a valid issue. But now there's an issue I need to know. And this comes back to the statement of Al-Imam Al-Humam Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, which he said, مَعْرِفَةُ مَا لَكَ وَمَا عَلَيْكَ. Now I need to know something else. I need to know what dalil is for me and what dalil is against me. Because someone else comes and says, I have 17 of the companions, or I have the number of the companions, all of them reported that the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands. Okay. But now I've got a problem. I had a dalil. I had wajh al-istidlal, right? I used it correctly. But my problem is what? My problem is now I'm learning the other guy's dalil. And maybe, I'm not here to talk about fiqh, don't worry about it. I'm just giving an example. Now I come to this issue, maybe his dalil is actually better than the dalil that I had. I had dalil, I used it correctly. And that's why Abu Hanifa describes fiqh. Ma'rifatu an-nafs, knowing your soul, ma laha wa ma alayha, knowing what is on your side and what's against you. In other words, you cannot be faqih until you know what the other guy has inside the madhab to begin with, because we don't want to dive in the deep end too early. Start, inside the madhab. Did all of the Shafi'i agree upon this, or there's a qawl? Do we go with Rafi'i and Nawawi? Where are we here? And then later on, outside of the madhab, because perhaps the truth in this issue isn't in the Shafi'i madhab at all. Even some masail, and I believe it's true, there are some masail, wallahu a'lam, that the truth is not in any of the four madahib. In other words, it's not a qawlun mu'tamad in any of the four madahib. It's rare, but it is true. You can get masail where it's not a qawl mu'tamad in the four madahib. And it's a qawl shadh. The Hanafi said it, but very few. Some Shafi'i said it, but very few. It's not considered to be acceptable, and it's not considered to be mainstream in the madhab, right? It's not considered to be, so it's qawl shadh. But you look at the evidence and you say, wallahi, the Quran, the Sunnah and what they took, and I look at their wajh al-istidlal and their dalil, and wallahi, I personally believe that the rajih, the correct issue in this matter is not a qawl mu'tamad in any single madhab. It's very rare, extremely rare, but I believe it's not impossible. Because we said Jibreel didn't bring down the madahib. And you're going to say, Akhi Muhammad, Allah yahdeek. Akhi Muhammad, do you not believe in ijma'? Of course. But the four madahib are not ijma'. Ikhwani, if Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafii and Ahmad agree on something, this is not ijma'. Ijma' is the agreement of the scholars of a particular time. It's the agreement of scholars of a particular time. Were there other scholars in the time of Abu Hanifa? There were. We have to also listen. Were there other scholars in the time of Imam Ahmad? There were. We have to also listen. Were there other scholars in the time of Imam Malik? So just because these four agree on something, it does not necessarily equate to ijma'. You might say ittafaqa al-madahib al-arba'. The madahib al-arba', they agreed on it. That's very good. And it's very strong, right? If all four agreed, it's very strong. I'm not saying it's not strong. But I'm saying just because the four of them agreed, it doesn't equate to ijma' necessarily. It might be ijma', it might not be ijma' consensus. Therefore, it might be possible the issue is not even present in it. So you must know ma laka wa ma alayk. And this, to some people, wallahi, it's very sad. they actually strip their madhab of this. They make it out that you, ayyuha talib, there is no way that you can know the evidence that your shaykh had. I'm not saying disrespect your shaykh. I'm not saying, shaykh, ma andak daleel, and you don't have any evidence, and shaykh, wallah, I don't know where you brought this from in jaybik, your pocket. Or, no, it's not disrespecting your shaykh. But eventually you will learn, where did your shaykh take his opinion from? I don't know how anyone can study a madhab at an advanced level without knowing ma laka wa ma alayk. What evidence do you have and what evidence comes against you? Then you come maybe to the level of tahrir, where you yourself start to say, you know what it is? I incline towards the view of Al-Imam Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala in this issue. I personally, when I looked at what Shafii said, what was for him, what was against him, and I looked at what Malik said, what was for him, what was against him. Remember, I've studied the madhab in detail for several years. I've taken from shuyukh, I've listened to what they said. But I start to, I start to have a stage of tahrir. I start to be able to start now to maybe have a preference. Now, we're not saying that I'm going and just rewriting the madhab, and I'm, the Hanbali madhab, we're not Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. We're not, we're not going and changing around the madhab, not at all. But it is true that every student will eventually reach a level where they start to make tarjih in issues. They start to have preferences. That is why, Ikhwani, do you believe today, if I go to, for example, as an example, if I go to a Dar al-Ulum, for example, or something like that, and if I go and sit on study the Hanafi madhab there, for example, for those that teach that madhab, do you think that their scholars don't have tarjihat? I'm not, no disrespect, honestly, do you think their scholars don't have preferences? Do you think that their scholars, that the scholars of Dar al-Ulum didn't choose some matters over others and prefer some opinions in the madhab over others? Look at the fatwa of Shaykh Taqiyuddin. There's nobody, you cannot argue this. This is like a fact, historical fact. You have tarjihat. People will get to a stage where they will prefer some opinions and go away from some opinions. Some of those opinions they go away from will be the opinions of Al-Imam Al-A'zam, the great Imam, the Imam that is the founder of the madhab. How many opinions today in any one madhab do we believe actually came from mansus, the nas of that Imam? Not as many as you would think. I don't want to put percentage, it could be more or less, but not as many as you think. And that actually responds a little bit to those people who are like, yeah, but my Imam is better than your Imam. Tayyib, no doubt. Al-Ain wal-Ras, we agree with you. Your Imam is better than my Imam. But the musibah is, you're not taking from your Imam, akhi. You're taking the tarjihat of the guy who leads the salah in the masjid. Don't talk to me about Al-Imam Al-A'zam, Taqa bi Anas ibn Malik, or fulan. Don't tell me this great Imam, he met Anas ibn Malik, he met so many of the Tabi'een, he was a great... Don't tell me this, because you're not taking what he said, you're taking this whole history of people. And some of that history is influenced by the very person who sits in front of you to teach you. Some might say no, because we have in our tradition, in our tradition, the people who teach the madhab to the younger people, they are also, strict upon the taqleed of their shuyukh. But still, okay, no, not him, not your teacher, your teacher's teacher. Eventually, you're going to get influences upon the madhab that didn't come, not from the Imam, not from the students of Imam, not from someone 200 years ago, from someone who lived, maybe is still alive today. And that's not bad. Just don't put the wool over your eyes and say that, I'm putting my footsteps in the feet of the great Imam. Before you didn't have a chance. Because, for example, if we look at the life of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, before you even put your footsteps where he stood, Abu Yusuf came and took his footsteps away and put them somewhere else. So you don't have the ability to do that. You don't. So yes, there's great Imams. We love our great Imams, rahimahullah ta'ala. But don't put the wool over your eyes and tell yourself that I am the shadow of this Imam. In reality, you are influenced by all the people who came after that Imam. All of them. Until your teacher who sits in front of you, who is going to make what? Tarjihat. He's going to say to you, this is the rajih in the madhab. This is al-qawl al-mu'tamad indana. This is our opinion. This is what we believe to be correct. And over time. So people grow. One mistake people have is to believe, and I believe it's a mistake, and it's controversial, but I believe it's a mistake, is that people believe that the issue is taqleed or ijtihad. Sarah, me personally, I'll be honest with you, I don't believe that that is the waqi'. I believe that that's wrong from, it might be theoretically correct, but I believe in reality it doesn't exist. Nobody, for example, was muqallid, haqq al-taqleed, yani proper taqleed, taqleed. And then they woke up one morning, and after they had their cornflakes, they became mujtahid. هذا لا يوجد يا أخي. Doesn't happen. Rather, they grew day by day, mas'ala by mas'ala. We told you, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he went to Hammad ibn Salama rahimahullah, and he asked him about seeking knowledge. And he told him, تعلم في كل يوم ثلاث مسائل. Learn 3 masail every single day. ولا تزد, and don't do anything more than that. Until he became an imam and a faqih that the people used to point with their fingers when he would walk past. Look at the imam. The point is, it's a gradual approach, right? When you start, you do start with taqleed, yani haqq al-taqleed, yani. Your teacher says, put your hands on your chest, sami'na wa ata'na. You put them on your chest. Ya akhi, you don't know la Bukhari wala Muslim, wala, you don't know mustalah, and you don't know usul, and you don't know anything. Your teacher said, do it. That's okay. Because what are you doing? You took the person who's most qualified that you could access. You didn't go for Imam Malik. Imam Malik. You know, in the Muwatta, you have the hands on the chest, but I see your followers with the hands down by the sides. Can you just help me out here, Sheikh? Nobody did this. What you did is you went to the most knowledgeable person you had access to, who's teaching you fiqh. And what did you do? You took fiqh from him. In the beginning, you just got tasawwur al-masail. You understood like tahara, wudu, okay, types of water, okay, using water, getting rid of najasat, okay, making wudu. All right, what do you do with the extra water in wudu? Like, you just got an idea of what fiqh is. And then you start to grow and grow and grow. You start to get dalil. And all of the madahib, I don't know, wallahi, it's dhulm upon people to say that the madhab doesn't give dalil. I do not know any madhab which doesn't give dalil. He's going to bring you dalil. He's going to bring you, in fact, they give dalil like they shout it from the rooftops because they want to show that their opinion is stronger. This is my evidence, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this. Sah. So, in reality, you're going to start getting dalil slowly. Then you're going to start realizing that all of your teachers don't have the same opinion. And that our beloved Sheikh Abdullah has a different opinion from our beloved Sheikh Abdurrahman. And they're both on the same madhab from the same books. But you realize there's ikhtilaf within the madhab. And as you grow, you realize that there's a world outside of your madhab. And you realize that wallahi it's true. That the prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wallahi inni la uqsim billah, it does not exist in any madhab completely. And I think that Shafii has quotes like this, Ahmad has quotes like this. There is no single madhab that gathers all of what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do perfectly. So you realize there's a world outside your madhab. You know, you've been taught, you've grown up in the Shafi'i madhab, you've been taught, just keep away from those Hanafis guys, they're dangerous. Don't take from them, Ashab al-Ra'i. We don't take from our, they're intelligent, they're using their opinions and reasoning. You're from Ashab al-Hadith, don't take it from them, don't look at their books. But after a while you reach a level where you realize that guys, they got some things right that the others got wrong. And you start to say, okay, I'm now qualified through my teacher, my sheikh, to take some of the khilafiyat, the differences between the madahib, or what they call a fiqh al-muqaran, comparative fiqh. and start to learn ma laka wa ma alayk. You know, okay, here you are flying the flag of the madhab, and then you look at all your dalil, and you now have to look at the other person's dalil, and you have to be honest with yourself for Allah, sincerely for Allah. Is my dalil stronger or their dalil stronger? And sometimes in the beginning you don't feel confident. You're like, look, I'm on safe ground here. I'm following great imams of the past, so my feet are on the ground. I'm happy. So you're okay with it. But as time goes on, you get a little more confident, you grow a little bit, you get a little bit more knowledgeable, a bit more usul, more study of hadith, more study of ayat. And if you're being true to yourself and honest to yourself, you will sometimes have moments where the sunnah becomes clear to you. And Shafii reported, ijma', consensus. Bear in mind, who did Shafii meet? He met the students of Abi Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. He was the student of Imam Malik, Imam Shafii. He narrated hadith from Imam Malik. And he was the companion of Imam Ahmad. So when a Shafii narrates ijma', this is the ijma' of the students of Abi Hanifa, as well as the ijma' of Shafii himself, as well as the ijma' of Malik and Ahmad. He said, ajma'a al-ulama. The scholars have consensus. أن من استبانت له سنة عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The one that the sunnah becomes clear to a person, it is not allowed for them to leave it for the speech of anyone, كائنا من كان, whoever they are. Consensus. He didn't say this is only for the students, only for the teachers. Ijma', that if the sunnah is clear to you, this is the key word, istabanat, it becomes clear to you, haram for you to take anyone else's speech other than the Prophet ﷺ. However, the sunnah doesn't become clear on day one. Are we agreed? Yani, like the first day you study and you're like, yeah, I know, you know, like you see some people, you do, yani, a little bit of ta'assub on issues, you know. I take the opinion of our Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala on the issue of the niqab. Like until now, akhi, you don't know not the hadith, nor the level of the hadith, nor do you know the principles of it, nor do you know the fiqh of it, nor do you know what the evidence of the other person is. So, you know, before you shout from the rooftops, you need to know, you need to grow a bit. But as you grow in your learning of Islam, there are times when the sunnah becomes clear to you. And there are times, and when the sunnah becomes clear to you, you owe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you do not leave the wahi for the opinion of people. And that's progress. It's not something that is like in everything. Some of the scholars, As-Suyuti, I think rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, 40 years I took a mas'ala, I didn't know what the rajih in the mas'ala was. Something like that. He said 40 years, around 40 years. I had an issue, I had no idea what the sunnah was in it. I have no idea. So the reality is, as it becomes clear to you, you will take the sunnah, because your heart is attached to the sunnah. Even inside your madhab, before everyone gets angry and says you're telling them to go out the madhab again, before that, even within your madhab, you will see that one great scholar has one opinion, one has the other. But for you soon, the sunnah becomes clear to you and you say, yeah, I'm with this one. You know, it happens. It's natural growth of knowledge that happens. Over time, the student becomes more and more and more and more knowledgeable. Will they ever reach the level of the mujtahid? In the first place, the scholars disagree whether ijtihad mutlaq even exists today. And some of them say there is no absolute ijtihad. In reality, everyone who gives a fatwa today, even from their own ijtihad, they give it from one of the scholars of the past. They bring, like Abu Hanifa said this, I believe Abu Hanifa was correct, I believe Shafii was correct in this, but they don't bring you something from themselves. But in reality, even if we say the door is open, which is, I believe, has to be the stronger opinion, because in reality you have nawazil, you have new issues, you have calamities that happen where people have to make ijtihad. So I don't think ijtihad is closed. But whatever it is, very few people reach the level of al-ijtihad, where they don't tell me what any imam said, just give me the ayah, don't tell me the tafsir, I'm going to make it all for myself. Very few people reach that level. Some of the scholars said nobody reached that level in our time. I don't think that's quite true, but it really very, very few people reach that level. But you do start to become more familiar with the evidences and more comfortable and more likely to prefer something over something else. There's a beautiful book, wallahi, I believe everybody should read it, and I'm sure there's some people who would not like me to say this. But wallahi, really, this is, if you want to know, you always get told off, you Salafis don't like the Imams. We do, you know it. You don't like the four Imams. Let me quote you from Raf'ul Malam. Who wrote Raf'ul Malam? This book, Raf'ul Malam, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. He wrote it to defend the four Imams. It's a book defending the four Imams. It's called Raf'ul Malam. He said, let it be known that there is no one from the Imams who have been accepted by the Ummah, meaning the great Imams of Islam, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafii, and Ahmad, whoever deliberately intended to go against the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in anything from his sunnah, large or small, they were without doubt agreed upon the obligation of following the Messenger, and the fact that every one of the people has some of their statements accepted and others rejected except the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, if an opinion of one of them is found while there's an authentic hadith which opposes it, there must be a reason why they left that hadith. Ya salam. Ibn Taymiyyah is defending it. He's saying if you saw there was a hadith, an authentic hadith, and you saw Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala give a fatwa which opposes a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, know that there has to be a reason why the Imam did it. No way did he do it to oppose the Sunnah. No chance. He has to have had a sabab, a reason why he did it. There has to be a reason. Because not one of those Imams ever deliberately intended to oppose the Sunnah in anything large or small. He's writing this book to defend the Imams. When the people say that the Imams went against the Sunnah, the Imam opposed the Hadith, he didn't. But there's an important issue here. Very important issue. So, for example, it might be the Imam never got the Hadith. It might be that the Hadith had a weak chain when it reached him and an authentic chain when it reached somebody else. Or it might be that the Imam didn't remember the Hadith at the time. It happened to Umar radiallahu anhu that sometimes he forgot a Hadith. There are examples in the Sunnah of Umar forgetting a Hadith that was said to him. And then later he's reminded by one of the Sahaba and he takes it. So in any case, it's important to note something very important. Even though the Imam is excused, even though the Imam is excused, the Imam gets one reward. Even if he gets it wrong, he gets one reward. It doesn't mean that we are all excused with the Imam. Does that make sense? This might be difficult, but try to follow me on this. The Imam is ma'dhur, excused. Why? Because he's mujtahid, he's deserving of ijtihad. And the mujtahid, إِذَا أَصَابَ, if he gets it right, فَلَهُ أَجْرًا, he gets two rewards. وَإِذَا أَخْطَأ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ وَاحِدٌ, he gets one reward. So the Imam either got two rewards for getting it right or one reward for getting it wrong. You, Ya Abdullah, come, call it 1300 years, 1350 years later. And the Sunnah becomes clear to you in a matter and you say, no, because if I follow Imam Malik, I'm going to get one reward. Now the one reward is for him, not for you. It's for him that he tried his best with what he had and he came to the truth. And you must also try your best with what you have. You must also try your best. So you also cannot hide behind that shield and say this. Shafii said, أجمع الناس على من استبانت له سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يكن له أن يدعها لقول أحد من الناس. The quote of Shafii that I mentioned to you earlier. Second reason why the scholars differ, I'm trying for the break, honestly. Second reason why the scholars differ, they differ because of al-lughatul arabiyyah. So now, Imam Malik quotes an ayah, and Imam Ahmad quotes an ayah, and the two of them differ about it. It's an ayah, there's no issue of authenticity, there's no issue of the hadith didn't reach them. They both quote the ayah, and they differ about it. For example, وَإِن كُنتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِطِ أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. Surah An-Nisa. If you have touched a woman and you don't find water, provide tayammum with clean earth. In here, the Jumhur, which here are the Hanafiya, the Malikiya, and the Hanabila on one side. And on the other side, Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala wa rahimallahu al-jami'. Both of them quote the ayah. Both of them say, my evidence is the ayah. One of them says that touching the hand of a woman or touching a woman breaks your wudu, and the others say it doesn't. Both of them quote the same ayah. It's no chance they didn't memorize the ayah, didn't know, they all memorized the ayah. No chance they didn't remember the ayah, they both quoted the ayah. What's the problem here? Al-Lughatul Arabiyyah. The Arabic language. The word lamps in the Arabic language can mean to touch, and it can mean marital intimacy. Both. And both meanings are found in the Quran. So the Quran uses the word lamps for both. So now you can't say, okay, Arabic, but the Quran only uses it for this. No, the Quran uses it to mean marital intimacy, and the Quran also uses the same word to mean touching. So now the basic difference, there are other reasons, they're supporting evidences, they're not just mentioning one ayah, but here the real difference is Al-Lughatul Arabiyyah, the Arabic language came with both meanings. وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء. 3 quru. The word qar came in the Arabic language meaning al-hayd, meaning menstruation, and the word qar came in the Arabic language meaning at-tuhr, meaning purification. So the scholars differed among themselves. Both of them quoted the ayah. One of them said quru means 3 periods of purity, and one of them said 3 menstrual periods, because the word qar comes with both meanings in the Arabic language. So the point is this. And then the third reason they differ is because of the usul. The third reason they differ is because of usul al-fiqh and al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. That they have different usul. For example, as I said, we are not the world's greatest expert in the usul of the Ahnaf, for example. But one of the things we see a lot in their books of fiqh from the point of view of usul is the issue of what happens when the rawi, the narrator of a hadith, doesn't act upon the hadith that he narrated. طيب? A narrator, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, or someone else narrates a hadith, but then his companions narrate that Abdullah ibn Umar did not practice this hadith himself. He narrated it, but he didn't practice it. What I saw, and I'm not, forgive me for the brothers who are expert in the madhab, I'm not an expert, but as we saw, that generally speaking from the usul of the ahnaf in this issue is that they will go with the action of the rawi rather than the hadith which is narrated. They will take that the action of Abdullah ibn Umar here supersedes his statement, which is a sensible position. It's not crazy to say that someone narrated a hadith and then later on he didn't do what he narrated, and so we follow what he did rather than what he said. I'm sure it's more complicated than that. I'm sure there's khilaf on it. I'm sure there's many books of usul written about it. But just a simple point. Other scholars, they said, no, he might have forgotten the hadith. He might have had a reason why he didn't implement it, like some sickness. It might be the narrations about him leaving it are weak. So no, we don't really mind if the rawi leaves the hadith. To us, it only matters the hadith is authentic. We're not interested whether the narrator left it or didn't leave it. And others, other than Abdullah ibn Umar, did it as well. So we're not, from our point of view, our usul, we are not really concerned if a narrator stops practicing the hadith that they narrate. The Shafi'iyah, in the issue of saddul dhara'i, stopping the things that lead to haram. The Shafi'iyah, they said, generally speaking, the Shafi'i usul, that unless the dhari'ah is mansusa, it's specifically mentioned that it's a means to the haram, we don't prohibit it. We don't prohibit it. We don't prohibit something because I personally think it's dangerous. We only prohibit it if the danger is mansus. It's specifically mentioned that there is a danger in it. And the dhari'ah here, the path that leads to the danger, we are not going to accept this as being dangerous or prohibited unless the danger you're scared of is, the dhari'ah here is mansusa. It's specifically mentioned in the text. Again, generally speaking, we're not taking usul fiqh today, but just as an idea. Others said no. If it is understood, if we come together and we see that there is a danger in something and it's leading to haram, we consider it to be haram, even if that specific haram is not mentioned in the text. In general here, the issue, there's a series of books that you take called Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul. How do you apply usuli principles to fiqhi rulings? How do you take these principles and apply them to rulings? There's a science called Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul, applying the fundamental principles to the subsidiary matters. And he taking the matter like, for example, the issue of wudu, and applying the usul of the madhab to that issue. It's called Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul. So here we understood that these are the reasons why people differ, and I would highly recommend the book Raf' al-Malam, so you will have your proper respect for the scholars of Islam, and you understand why those scholars differed with each other, and you understand that doesn't mean, what's the misconception? It doesn't mean that both of them are right. There are two types of ikhtilaf. Ikhtilafu tanawwu' and ikhtilafu tadad. Ikhtilafu tanawwu', it means two scholars differed, but their opinions are not contradictory. One scholar and another scholar differed about something, but their opinions don't clash with each other. For example, they said you can do this or do that. It's permissible for this or that, or they said this is preferred but this is allowed. But what do you do when there's tadad? They really clashed with each other. One said halal, one said haram. In this case, one of them is right and the other one has to be wrong. But ultimately, as we said, as we grow in knowledge, the sunnah becomes clear to us. So our allegiance is to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not to the particular madhab or the particular sheikh or the particular school that taught me this particular matter. I don't know about you, but I need a break by now. So I think we should take a break. We were supposed to take a break like an hour ago, but wallahi, I told you, I think we taught, it's like 26 hours we taught this topic. So I'm not going to give you 26 hours, don't worry. We're supposed to finish by Asr. I will do my best in the break to try to sort things out and try to highlight some things and whatever. But inshallah, everyone's listening to the general message, right? You're getting the general message, the role of the madhab. What we do need to talk about is the role of the madhab for the awam. That's going to come after the break. How does the regular Muslim who is not studying fiqh at all, to what extent are they taking from the madhab or not? That also has to be discussed. هذا والله أعلم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Okay. If we can ask all of the brothers to come back, inshallah, we're going to resume our discussion bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. نعم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah ta'ala, this is how the program is going to go for the next 45 minutes inshallah. We're going to finish our topic in the next, adhan is 4:30 I believe here, and the salah would be 4:45. So we might go between the adhan and the iqama a little bit, but we're going to inshallah finish our topic by then, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. What we will then do is break for Asr prayer, and after Asr we will have Q&A. Now, my encouragement to the brothers and sisters would be, where possible, I have no problem with the brothers coming to ask questions and privately, no issues, but I just feel like sometimes your questions are so good and you can benefit everybody. So, bring your questions on paper, and after Asr we will answer, and then whatever we don't answer on paper, we should have a little time just to pass by some of the brothers who had some questions. So let's just talk a little bit about the stages of development of the madahib. In the beginning, the Prophet ﷺ, he was the only teacher. There was no other teacher except him ﷺ. And then those that he appointed as teachers like Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu. And in the end of this, at this time, in the time of prophethood, it's the time of revelation, right? There is no, or almost no, ikhtilaf. Almost no. You can't say none. Sometimes the Sahaba were away, sometimes. But there is almost no serious difference of opinion. Why is that? Because any difference of opinion that becomes serious, where are they going to go back to? Back to the Prophet ﷺ during his life. O Messenger of Allah, so and so did this and so did that. Which one of them is right? So the differences of opinion among the Sahaba were extremely, extremely small. There's another difference, another reason why the differences were so small. And this is that in reality, the Muslim nation was quite small, and the people in it were limited in number. In this time, how was fiqh derived? How did we derive fiqh? From the Quran and the Sunnah, from as-Sunnah al-Qawliya wal-Fi'liya wal-Taqreeriyya. The Sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ said, the Sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ did, and the Sunnah that he approved of. Disputes and questions were brought before the Prophet ﷺ. He answered the questions and he settled the disputes. In terms of fiqh, where did fiqh flourish more? Makkah or Medina? In Medina. And that is because in Makkah, it was primarily the time of tasheeh al-i'tiqad, correcting people's beliefs. And then it went into a stage where, along with the beliefs, there was also the aspects of fiqh and rulings and so on. Did the Prophet ﷺ teach fiqh or usul al-fiqh? No doubt he did. But he didn't teach it in a separate lesson. He didn't come and say, Ashabi, my dear companions, today I'm going to teach you usul al-fiqh. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ taught us usul. And qawa'id, for example, he taught us the qa'ida la darara wa la dirar. There should be neither harm, nor should harm be reciprocated. But there were no dedicated fiqh lessons or dedicated usul or qawa'id. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ taught according to the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. And from these statements of the Prophet ﷺ later on, the scholars extracted principles. Ad-darra yuzal, تدفع أعلى المفسدتين بارتكاب أدناها أو أدناهما. And you get rid of the big evil by taking the smaller one. These things came from what the Prophet ﷺ said. And this was the best of all of the times in which fiqh was taught. And everybody agrees, nobody disagrees, that the best time to study fiqh was from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there is no disagreement on that from anybody. That the best time that you could have ever studied fiqh was from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there's a benefit I want to take from this. That the goal in fiqh is not jam'ul aqwal, but the goal in fiqh is ma'rifatul rajih wal amali bihi. Wal amalu bihi. That's the goal. So the goal in fiqh, by the dalil of the Sahaba, the goal in fiqh is not to gather everyone's different opinion. I know the opinion of this imam and this sheikh and this student, and I know all of the different. That's not the goal. The goal is to know what is correct, and the goal is to act upon it. And we're going to come back to that point when we talk about the regular person. Because our regular people, the ammat al-nas, they're not studying the books of the madhab, typically. Maybe you teach Matan Abi Shuja' in the masjid. You teach Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat, or you teach something, a matan. But it's not common, right? Generally in the masjid, the teacher just teaches people what to do, right? He teaches this how you pray. Everyone, we're going to learn how to make wudu. He doesn't, quote the books and teach the books like that. He just teaches the people. In this, is the teacher wrong? When our sheikh, for example, stands in the masjid and says, my brothers, I'm going to show you how to make wudu. And he shows how to make wudu. Is he wrong because he didn't open Matan Abi Shuja' and start, or Safinatul Najah and start reading from it? No, he's not wrong. Because the goal here is ma'rifatul rajih. In the Hanafi madhab, that you will see the emphasis upon the madhab among the regular people. I don't mean that it's not common in the others, but it's you see a lot of emphasis on really learning the madhab, and trying to take the regular person at least into the basics of fiqh from the madhab. And it's true in other places as well. Certain Shafi'i places, countries where they really try to but generally speaking, whatever it is, that regular person is not memorizing the matan, nor are they studying it in detail. They are just, the teacher is a qualified person, and the teacher shows them how to pray, how to fast, what to do, and so on. And that's where they're taking their fiqh from, and there's nothing wrong with that. From the evidence that this is what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum did. And this is what happened in the time of the Khulafa al-Rashideen, and all the way up until maybe 250 years after the Hijrah. That's what people did. So there's nothing at all wrong with a teacher teaching people according to that teacher's knowledge. Now here comes the question. Should that teacher stick to his madhab? In reality, that's the teacher's choice. The teacher is qualified. If the teacher feels that the best way is to take the people through the madhab, and if the teacher feels, and then make tarjih, make preferences and select opinions, or if the teacher feels that it's best for the teacher to gather their personal, way of doing things, at the end of the day, that's why you have qualified teachers. There should not be any issue with this. This leads us to a question before we talk about the second stage, which is al-intisabu ila al-madhab. Someone says, I am Muhammad Tim Hanbali. Is it allowed? Here we differentiate between two types of intisab. We differentiate between mujarrad al-intisab, just taking the name. I studied Hanbali books, my teacher was Hanbali teacher, and now I've taken that name as as something to show that I had studied from that madhab, and maybe when I write a book, people can understand my opinions in light of the madhab, Like it's nice when you're reading, you pick up a book of hadeeth, Bulugh al-Maram, for example. Al-Imam al-Hafidh ibn Hajar al-Shafii, rahimahullah ta'ala. No problem, and it tells me, that's why he left that hadith. It tells me and that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But where does intisab go wrong? Where does it go wrong for someone to say that I am whatever, Maliki or whatever? The first is at-ta'assub lil-imam. Like extremism and partisanship when following the imam. The second is ash-shiqaqu fil madhab. See? Yep, back on the same stream. So we should be, inshallah, if you have a check of it, it should be on the exact same stream. So we didn't break anything, guys. We didn't add anything. You haven't missed anything. If you're on the live stream, you haven't missed anything at all. So we were talking about when does intisab become haram. We said ta'assub, breaking people up in the masjid, insulting the other madahib, taking away from their honor and their right, or seeking superiority over other people because of al-madhab al-fiqhi. This is something that is not praiseworthy. But if a person has intisab to a madhab and they are not blindly following their imam, as we quoted Imam Shafi'i's ijma' on the issue, they are not insulting other people, they're not breaking up among the Muslims, they're not seeking superiority and to look down on other people, then there is no issue with this intisab. It doesn't hurt anybody. The question which might be perhaps more, I don't know if we could say, the question that is perhaps more important, or the question that is perhaps more, it's perhaps the question that needs to be asked is, does this intisab really benefit the regular Muslim? I mean, does it mean anything? Okay, he comes today and he says, my name is, for example, my name is Abdullah al-Shafi'i. I say, Abdullah, mashallah, please tell me, where did you research or where did you reach in the books of the Shafi'i madhab? He says, Shafi'i, I never took anything. I just want to be with the Shafi'iyya. فَوَصِيَّتِي لِلنَّاسِ أَن يَتَشَفَّعُوا. I took the advice of the scholars and I just want to be Shafi'i. I would say, and this is just my personal opinion, I would suggest to you that this intisab, it really doesn't have any meaning to it. In reality, it doesn't actually mean any real thing, to be honest with you. Like, what does it mean? Like, the person, he doesn't have ta'assub, he's not extreme, he's not insulting other people, he's not seeking to look down on them. He's just a regular guy. I just come to the masjid and pray. Ya akhi, he's going to go against his madhab 200 times in a week. Because he hasn't studied it. He doesn't know the madhab, the limits of the madhab. He's just, in reality, all he can do is to take the opinions of his teacher. And if his teacher is staunch on a madhab, he'll be staunch on the madhab. And if his teacher is a bit more relaxed, he'll be relaxed. But he's a regular guy. So there's nothing wrong with his intisab. It doesn't hurt you anything. But it also doesn't benefit the regular person in a real way. It's nothing wrong, might. But it doesn't really bring them something that actually has. I don't believe this intisab really means anything for someone who's not studying the madhab and not actively memorizing and studying the books. It probably doesn't really mean anything to them. And even someone who's just dipping their finger into it. Okay, you dipped your finger into, Safinatul Najah or something like that. It doesn't make you Shafi'i in reality. You didn't really understand the madhab or take anything significant to it. So the name, calling yourself a Shafi'i, really, it just doesn't bring you anything. So my point is, it's not haram if there's no ta'assub, there's no breaking the Muslims apart, but just you have to ask yourself, does it really make any difference to that regular person? The reality is, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. A lot of people use this as a dalil for the madhab. Like, in this dalil actually is a dalil صراحة against the madhab, not for it. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. There's no people of knowledge from one madhab. This ayah indicates I can ask anyone of knowledge, right? I'm not talking about the ruling, I'm just talking about the ayah itself. ظاهر الآية is I can ask any person of ilm. That's what the ظاهر of the ayah is. So this ayah really is not, it doesn't help them. It doesn't really help them in anything. So my point is, this is what regular people do. The person you think is this staunch, adherent to a certain madhab, is, to be honest with you, just following the local imam of the masjid most of the time. That's what they're doing, because they're not a student of knowledge, they're not studying, they're not memorizing. So my point of view is that this intisab really doesn't have any reality to it. It's just a name. I can call myself, the righteous, my surname is Humble, right? I didn't choose this name for myself in Islam. And this name was my parents. And فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, don't declare yourself. But it doesn't make me humble any. It's just a name. And putting a Shafi'i at the end of my name doesn't make me Shafi'i either, So that's what I think. The next stage is the age of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq died 13 years after the Hijrah until the death of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhum ajma'in 40 years after the Hijrah. Now there is no single reference point for ikhtilaf, right? If the Sahaba differ, there's not one guaranteed person you can get a 100% answer from. Is that agreed? Okay. However, the number of jurists is very small, and those jurists still report to the Khalifa. So ultimately, still it's going back to Abu Bakr, especially in judgments, it's going back to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But ultimately the number of people giving fatwa is tiny anyway. So, but there is nothing here of people say, I am Umari, I'm following Umar, ana ala madhab Umar, I only take from Umar, I'm very careful not to ask Uthman. Nobody did this, yeah? Nobody says this from any of the madahib, that this never happened in the time of the Sahaba, that the Sahaba were attributing themselves or following any particular madhab of a Sahabi. And ultimately, if they're going to disagree, they're going to go back to the Khalifa. The Khalifa in terms of judgments. They might disagree in terms of rulings, but in a judgment like what's going to actually be carried out, they're going to go back to the Khalifa. Are we adding another source of tashri' here? Another source of legislation? Yes. Now we have what? Ijma'. We don't need ijma' in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. We don't need ijma', right? In his time, there is no consensus. We don't need it. There's one statement. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. You don't have a choice. Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that's what you do. There's no choice. But ijma' comes after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, is ijma' something that was invented by the Sahaba? No. It's mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in the Sunnah. In the Quran, in the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَن يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولِ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. So ijma' now comes that Allah says, whoever opposes the messenger after guidance came to them and follows a way other than the way of the believers, we will entrust him to what he's chosen and put for him Jahannam, and what a terrible destination. So following a way other than the way of the believers, didn't say following a way other than the way of Umar, following a way other than the way of Ali, all of the Sahaba, and they go against ijma' of the Sahaba, نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمْ. He'll be given what he's chosen and put into Jahannam. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَجْمَعُ أُمَّتِي عَلَى ضَلَالَةٍ. Allah will not gather my nation upon misguidance. The hadith has some difference of opinion regarding its authenticity, but it came with a few different wordings, and it's generally something the scholars, they narrate it and they accept it in terms of its meaning. Allah will not gather my nation upon misguidance. So Quran and Sunnah gave us ijma' as a tool, but we never used it until the time of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. Allahumma, maybe some rare cases where they all went out for a battle and they were by themselves. But in general, generally speaking, ijma' was not used until the time of the Sahaba. Abu Bakr was the most knowledgeable of the companions, radiyallahu anhu. But he has very few rulings because he was busy with the matter of the Khilafah. Umar had a much larger number of rulings and judgments. Where might you go if you wanted to find the judgments of Umar? First of all, you can go to the books that gather the Athar, Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, and you can go to some of the Jawami'. Even in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, you can find narrations from the Sahaba in certain aspects. But generally, like the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba and places like that, rahimahullah ta'ala, you can find the Athar of the Sahaba. But Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'een, he gathers a number of these A lot of these rulings are gathered together. Now you get to the age of the younger companions and the senior tabi'een. Now we have, what do we have? We have the 7 jurists of Medina. Ubaydullah, Urwa, Qasim, Sa'id Abu Bakr, Sulaiman al-Kharij, and Sa'id ibn Musayyib and Urwa ibn Zubayr, and Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar, and Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and Abu Salama ibn Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Sulaiman ibn Yasar and Kharija ibn Zayd ibn Thabit. The 7 jurists of Medina. The 7 jurists of Medina. In this time, these 7 jurists become really very specialized in matters of fiqh and rulings. And in reality, the source, these 7 jurists really become the source of the 4 madahib in reality. Not all, but to a greater or lesser extent, their rulings end up filtering down into the 4 madahib. Then you come to the time of the tabi'een until 350 after the hijrah. And in this time, we see still a lot of fiqh is taken from a hadith. Of course, you have Ashab al-Ra'i, the people of Iraq, who primarily were using analogy and reasoning, who didn't have as much of an access to hadith. And so what you see is, still the books of fiqh are not being authored in large numbers. There is no clear set of madahib in this time. Not really. A little bit starts, but it's not really clear in this time. That there are which madahib will last and which will not, and the books are not written in detail. Then you come into sort of 350 after the hijrah, maybe a little earlier, and you start to have really lots of books that are written on the topic of fiqh. So you have some books that mix fiqh with the sunnah and athar, some books that are just pure fiqh, some books that are fiqh with its evidences like comparative fiqh. But at this stage you really start to get a lot of blind following and fanaticism. You start to get people taking from books of fiqh but not going back to the people who said them and not going back to the sunnah. You start to get people excommunicating each other, not marrying each other, and you also see people refusing to leave their madhab. And particularly the issues of politics and who became a judge, and particularly between the Ahnaf and the Shafi'iyah on the issues of who would be appointed a judge at that time, and a lot of fanaticism happened. And what I really wanted to show you, and again we're just mentioning it briefly, but you can research the history, is that in reality fanaticism to the madhab really started quite late. It started well after Al-Qurun al-Mufaddala. It started well after the noble generations. The Prophet ﷺ said about them, خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. It was after that you had ta'assub, extreme fanaticism, and calling each other kafir because of the madhab, and refusing to marry and refusing to pray behind each other. This never came in the time of, or it was not well known in the time of the golden generations. It wasn't known by the great imams, it wasn't known by their students, it wasn't known by the great scholars of hadith like Al-Bukhari and Muslim. These people never knew this kind of fanaticism. They didn't. There were issues of fiqh that get a bit heated. Al-Bukhari wrote his treatise on Raf' al-Yadayn, for example. There were some issues, but this fanaticism and excommunicating people and refusing to pray and refusing to marry people and like this hatred and whatever, it really never existed in the time of the great imams, nor did it exist in the time of the great scholars of hadith, but it came after that. And it came as fiqh started to solidify into a really separate science. Like we're talking about now, furu' fiqhiyya, and books being written on very specific aspects. As this starts to happen, people start to become more fanatical and less tolerant of other people. And bear in mind, tolerance doesn't mean everyone's right, as we said, but tolerance just simply means that going back to the book and the sunnah and seeing people's opinions in light of the book and the sunnah. Did they have an evidence or they don't? Do you believe that it's a qawl which is marjuh, it has a point but it's not correct? Or you believe it's a qawl which is batil la asla lahu, it has no dalil for it? So the way you differ with people depends on the kind of differing that we're talking about. Someone comes and says, I differ with you on the issue of la ilaha illallah. So me and him are going to clash heads. But someone says, I differ with you on whether you put your hands on your chest or whether you put it below the navel. I'm not going to differ with them on that level. I'm going to say to them, I have an opinion. I believe this is my dalil. This is why I believe it's right. And I'm going to strongly encourage them to change. They can also strongly encourage me. But the point is, I believe that their qawl is a qawl which is marjuh. It's not the strongest opinion. But I don't believe it's a qawl which is batilun la asla lahu. It's made up and it's evil and it's... So you differ with people differently according... But you're still looking for the truth. It's not like, okay, I tell you what it is, akhi, let's all split the masjid in half. Half pray like this and half pray like that. No, we want to come to the truth as much as we can. We want to come to the sunnah. But also, there is a different level of respect when you realize that evidences are being used and used correctly versus when somebody differs with you on a matter of aqeedah or differs with you on a matter of fundamentals of the religion. This is something very different. After that came the final stage of development, which we're going to talk about now, and this is after Baghdad. Fiqh continues to be very, very divided, polarized, but some scholars start to come out now. In this time, after the fall of Baghdad in 656? I got it right, 656. In 656 after the Hijrah. Now some people start to come up and say, hold on, excuse me, this ta'assub and blind following and hating each other is wrong. From them, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, his famous book, Raf'ul Malam, defending the Imams of Islam from the bad things that people are saying about them. Ibn al-Qayyim, Al-Imam al-Nawawi, Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, Kamal ibn Humam. People start to come and start to move away from this fanaticism. Wallahu a'lam. Allahu Akbar. what we're going to do now, inshallah, is just to take a couple of concluding points, perhaps 5 to 7 minutes, and then inshallah ta'ala we give everyone a break. If anyone does need to make sort of wudu and things like that, I would recommend just maybe, go bit by bit, so everybody doesn't crowd the wudu area. But inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to make a few basic points. First of all, another thing which is madhmoom in the madhab, which is blameworthy, is using the madhab as a means to control people. And this is something that we do see even until today, is that the reason why a person is not allowed to, I'll give an example. With me, for example, in my city when I first became Muslim, there was a certain madhab that was spread out. And the brother said to me, look, we doubt about you. You're not a proper Muslim. You need to choose a madhab. So they said to me, choose a madhab, right? I didn't know anything about madhab. I didn't know the Imams. I didn't know where they came from. I thought Abu Hanifa was from India, rahimahullah ta'ala, and Shafii was from, I didn't have any clue about anything. So I had this idea that I'd read that Imam Shafii was Qurashi, yani from Quraysh, rahimahullah ta'ala. And I thought, well, that's a bit closer than India. I'm going to be Shafi'i. So I remember saying to him, right, you told me to choose a madhab and you told me, it's not good for you, it's very bad for you, your iman is in doubt. And okay, I'm going to be Shafi'i. And they looked at me with just horror, like, no, we said choose a madhab, we didn't, you can't choose that madhab. But I want to be Shafi'i. No, you cannot be Shafi'i. Now we doubt your iman completely. We doubted you before, now we know. So the point is, what is this? It's a wanting of control. Not, okay, you love your madhab, you want people to follow, no problem. But it is an issue of control. We don't want you to go out of our control. We don't want you to realize that something the Imam says might be wrong, and then one day what do? You start practicing the right way, and maybe, that Imam just slips from that position that he's put himself in. And that's also madhmoom. I don't know any of the imma of the madahib and the great scholars of Islam who praise that sort of behavior. Let me quote you Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, لا يحل لمن يفتي من كتبي أن يفتي حتى يعلم من أين قلت. It's not permissible for anyone to give a fatwa from my books until he knows where I took my evidence from. And he used to give a fatwa and say, هذا رأي النعمان بن ثابت هذا رأي النعمان بن ثابت rahimahullah. He used to say, this is Nu'man's opinion. And he's speaking about himself. He says, this is Nu'man's opinion. وَهُوَ أَحْسَنُ مَا قَدِرْتُ عَلَيْهِ. It's the best I know. That's how best what I know. فَمَنْ جَاءَ بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهُ فَهُوَ أَوْلَى بِالصَّوَابِ. And if someone can bring something better than what I said, it's definitely we should take from them. And he said to Abu Yusuf, وَيْحَكَ يَا يَعْقُوبِ. Woe to you, O Yaqub. لا تكتب كل ما تسمع مني فإني قد أرى الرأي اليوم وأتركه غدا وأرى الرأي غدا وأتركه بعد غد. He said, O Yaqub, Abu Yusuf, O Yaqub, don't write everything you hear from me. Because I'm a person that I take an opinion today and maybe I change it tomorrow. Or I make an opinion tomorrow and I change it the day after that. Al-Imam Malik, he said, إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ أُخْطِئُ وَأُصِيبُ فَانظُرُوا فِي رَأْيِ فَكُلُّ مَا وَافَقَ الْكِتَابَ وَالسُّنَّةَ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا لَمْ يُوَافِقِ الْكِتَابَ وَالسُّنَّةَ فَاتْرُكُوهُ. He said, I'm just a person. I get things wrong and I get things right. So look at my opinions. And whatever agrees with the Quran and the Sunnah, take it. And whatever disagrees with the Quran and the Sunnah, leave it. And he said, لَيْسَ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْ قَوْلِهِ وَيُتْرَكْ إِلَّا النَّبِيَّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He said, nobody has all of their statements accepted. Everyone gets some things taken and other things rejected, except for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's an amazing fatwa. Imam Malik gave a fatwa that you're not supposed to separate your toes when making wudu. Like separate your toes. So a man came to him about this and he asked him about it. And this man, he said, I heard you giving a fatwa in this mas'ala, and you believe that there is no need to separate between your toes in wudu. وَعِنْدَنَا فِي ذَلِكَ سُنَّةٌ, but we have a hadith to prove it. What did Imam Malik say? Be quiet, don't tell me about hadith, it's my madhab. No, he didn't. He said, tell me the hadith. So when he told him the hadith, he said, إِنَّ هَذَا حَدِيثٌ حَسَنٌ, this is a reliable hadith. وَمَا سَمِعْتُ بِهِ قَطْ, I never heard it before. إِلَّا السَّاعَةِ, except right now is the first time I ever heard this hadith. Then he was being asked about it, and he straight away said to the people, all of you should separate between your toes in wudu. Straight away, he said, I never heard of this hadith until today. He is the Imam of hadith. He is the Imam, yani the Imam of hadith. And he never heard the hadith. I never heard it. Now we give the fatwa for it. Imam al-Shafi'i, he said, كل ما قلت فكان عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فكان عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خلاف قولي مما يصح فحديث النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أولى ولا تقلدوني. He said, everything I say, and the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said something and it's authentic that goes against what I said, take the hadith and don't make taqleed of me. And he said, إذا وجدتم في كتابي خلاف سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقولوا بسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعوا ما قلت. If you find in my book something that goes against the sunnah, take the sunnah of the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم and leave what I said. And then Imam Ahmad, he said, he used to really dislike for the books that were written. You know, he said that the book started to be written on the topic of fiqh. He really started to dislike it. And he just wanted the books to be written on hadith. And nobody to write down what he said. And if anyone would write down what he said, يُشَدُّ, or he would يَشْتَدُّ عَلَيْهِ جِدًّا, and he would be very rough with them and really harsh with them. Don't write down what I'm saying. You came to write hadith, you write hadith, don't write what I say. He didn't like for the people to write his fatawa, he only wished to like for the people to write hadith. And he said, من رد حديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فهو على شفا هلكة. He said, whoever rejects a hadith from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم is on the edge of destruction. And he said, رأي الأوزاعي ورأي مالك ورأي أبي حنيفة كله رأي وهو عندي سواء إنما الحجة في الآثار. He said, the opinion of Al-Awza'i, who had his own madhab, and Malik and Abi Hanifa is all an opinion. It's an opinion of someone. And all opinions to me are the same. But what matters to me are the narrations. And these are just some examples. I have a lot of examples, but I just wanted to quote you a few. We're going to stop there, inshaAllah ta'ala, for Salatul Asr. I hope that you found this lecture to be one that is balanced, inshaAllah. One that is respectful to the Imams of Islam and the Madahib. And at the same time, inshaAllah ta'ala, I hope also that you connected your heart to the Kitab and the Sunnah, and you realize that that is to follow those Imams. If you want to follow those great Imams, you follow them by connecting your heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. Insha'Allah ta'ala, we're going to break for Salah, and then after Salah we're going to take Q&A. Insha'Allah, for as much as Allah Azza wa Jal makes it easy. There are papers like this for you to write. They'll go around for you to write your questions on. I believe the sisters have papers upstairs as well. هذا والله أعلم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, inshallah ta'ala, we are going to be continuing with the Q&A segment of this class. Now, I'm going to start with questions on the topic, and then I'm going to move to questions off the topic. So I wrote 3 questions for myself, which I thought of that I should have answered in the class. can a person ask a sheikh from a different madhab? This answer to this question actually is a lot about understanding what I'm about to say. Because whether I say yes or no, it's not the full answer. Like anyone who says yes they can, they didn't give you the full answer. And anyone who says no you can't also didn't give you the full answer. There is tafsil on this issue. There needs to be some understanding. First of all, what is wajib upon the regular Muslim? It is to ask people of knowledge. That is what is obligatory upon the regular Muslim. Now this regular Muslim is living in a town where the Shafi'i madhab is prevalent, and they happen to ask a sheikh who is Shafi'i. We said their intisab to the madhab really doesn't make any difference. Yani they say they're Shafi'i or Hanafi or whatever, because they've not memorized anything, studied anything, or done anything. So they go to their sheikh, and the sheikh is Shafi'i. Say, Sheikh, give me a fatwa on this issue of nikah. I married my wife and the wali was not present. The Imam says, your nikah is batil. Repeat it. So in this situation, the person asked the person who is the most knowledgeable one they had access to. They didn't have access to somebody more knowledgeable than that. That's the best they had. And then they move city, and they have access to someone different, and that person is of a different madhab. Again, there is no harm in them asking that person in that situation. However, if they're asking about the same question, there has to be a reason for it. Because what is madhmoom here is not asking from the different madhab. What is blameworthy is asking the same question to more than one sheikh, in the madhab, out of the madhab. Because now what you're doing is, you're fatwa shopping. It's a new terminology, but it's true, fatwa shopping. You're browsing through the fatawa and looking for which one suits you. Ooh. Nikah without wali. I'll have one of those. That's how people are, right? It's not sincere. But someone says, Wallahi, the most knowledgeable I had access to was this sheikh. I asked him and then I could not access him again. I had to go to a different sheikh. Okay, I don't see any dalil. You have to bring me a dalil that he has to stay inside the madhab. He's not even in the madhab to begin with. So how shall we take him out? He's not even in. He never memorized, never studied, he's just asking whoever's available to him. So I don't see any dalil. I'm not talking about your preference or don't like it or you do like it, but I don't see any single dalil that he cannot ask somebody from a different madhab. But what he mustn't do is ask another person the same question without a valid reason. Because remember, he is a muqallid. In the sense, not talking about madhab, I mean, he's someone who's not qualified to bring his own rulings, and he's not qualified to even find the rulings of the scholars. So he asks someone and says, Sheikh, and this is my second question. Should a person be satisfied with taqleed? No, taqleed is horrible. Taqleed is horrible. Wallahi al-azim, like who wants to be satisfied? It's like eating the dead meat. Nobody wants to, if you have a nice banquet of halal chicken, nobody wants to eat the dead carcass they found on the road. Taqleed is what is good about not having any clue about your religion and having to take it from other people. There's nothing, single thing that is good about it. I'm not talking about generally the concept of the muqallid and the mujtahid, because somebody can have a lot of knowledge of their religion and still be in taqleed. I'm talking about like utter taqleed. Like the person is taqleed, they have, Sheikh, tell me what to do, I don't know any ayah or any hadith. Is that praiseworthy to be in that state? It's not. I don't think anybody who is reasonable would say that it's praiseworthy to live in a state where you are so ignorant of your religion, you're not even able to even find something resembling evidence for the problem you have. But the person is in that situation. So now in that situation, they are obliged to make taqleed of the person they asked. But the person they asked now, they have to ask the most knowledgeable person they have access to. Look, here it is, there's a sheikh, and it might not be the same person in every field. In mu'amalat it might be someone, in ibadat it might be someone, in aqeedah it might be someone, in whatever. We should never ever have taqdeed in aqeedah. But the point is that the person is making istiftah, they're asking for a fatwa, he goes to the most knowledgeable person he has access to. Someone specializes in business transactions, Islamic finance. Sheikh, I've got a question about funding my business. Best he can do. But he cannot evaluate the evidence. He is muqallid to the depths of taqleed. He can't evaluate, he doesn't know what the sheikh told him, just, sheikh, halal or haram? Haram, khalas. Later on, if he starts to study, or if he comes across evidence that suggests that his teacher was wrong, yes, he has the right now to seek clarification. He does. He has the right to say, my sheikh told me it's fine, I'm married without a wali, but I came across the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, la nikaha illa bi wali. There is no nikah except with a wali, you have to have the wali. And my sheikh told me that I don't have to have it, I got married, but I'm scared now because the hadith says there's no nikah if you don't have a wali. So I'm going to go and ask for some clarification. He has the right now to ask for that clarification because now he's scared that he's been given the wrong answer. And especially as he develops his knowledge in Islam, he may start to feel that certain things he was told might not have been correct, and he asks for further clarification. But what he's not allowed to do is say, yalla, let's have one of each. Hanafi, Maliki, Shafii. Sheikh number one, I want to get married. Do I need a wali? No. I'm with you. Sheikh number two, for the wedding ceremony, we want to serve prawn curry. Sheikh, can I do it? The first sheikh is like, la, 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 ya sheikh, makro. He's like, you're doing the nikah, you're serving the buffet, mate. La yajuz hada. This is playing with the religion. And nobody, when we say you're not required to ask the same sheikh in the same madhab every single moment of your life, what we don't mean is fatwa shopping, and what we don't mean is choosing the opinion that suits your hawa. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. Have you seen the one who took his God as his desires? No way, you cannot do that. But if a person took an answer from someone and they got the answer, they made taqleed of the sheikh, they had no knowledge, they got a little bit of knowledge, they thought the sheikh might have made a mistake, they sought clarification, still they're not sure, yeah, they have the right to ask. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. My last question that I asked to myself, you know things about when you're asking questions to yourself. Is there a madhab of Ahlul Hadith? Is there a madhab of Ahlul Hadith? This is a really interesting question. So when we mean Ahlul Hadith, we mean this, we're not talking Aqeedah now. Because those scholars of fiqh are Ahlul Hadith. We're talking about the scholars who were known for Hadith specifically. Now first of all we have a problem, because what do we do with Malik and Shafii and Ahmed now? Because they are just as famous in Hadith as they are in fiqh. Their fame in fact their fame in Hadith is perhaps more than their fame in fiqh even. So it becomes difficult. But okay, the scholars of Hadith who were not known to be attached to a particular madhab fiqhi from these madahib, like Al-Bukhari for example. Everyone, well, I think everyone thinks Bukhari was on their madhab. It's true. Al-Bukhari al-Shafi'i. Bukhari, where do you find his Shafi'i? Where did you find this? Because he narrated. No, it's not about narrations. Like this is, in reality, he was a mujtahid. He was qualified to make his own fatwa. He had his own madhab in reality. Like they say, Fiqhul Bukhari, the fiqh of Bukhari is in the chapter titles that he makes for his book. He gives his fiqh, he gives his madhab inside the chapter titles. But can you say that Bukhari and some of the others that gave their fiqh, they were known for fiqh, but they didn't bring it to one of those madahib, can you say that they had their own madhab called the madhab of Ahlul Hadith? It's a very interesting question, wallahi. It's very interesting. the issue requires research for sure, but people say it. They'll say, like for example, with regard to traveling, they'll say the Hanabila, they say 4 days. Leave the Maliki and Shafii. The Ahnaf is 14 or 15 days. 15 days? 15 days, right? Or 14 or 15 days. Ahlul Hadith is 19 days. They say things like that. The Madhab of Ahlul Hadith is 19 days. It needs, anyways, even if it exists, which it may well do, it's not something that you can study because it doesn't have its usul and qawa'id and all of the abwab of the furu' fiqhiyya. But it's interesting, did the scholars of hadith sometimes, who are the most knowledgeable people about the hadith, did they sometimes leave the boundaries of those madahib and take an opinion that is just theirs by itself? Yeah, they did. Of course they did. I think historically it's true, for sure, that they did. Al-Bukhari has opinions that are not found in any of al-madahib al-arba'. Not many, but you will find things, the madhab of Ahl al-Hadith. It's interesting anyways, inshallah. It's worth a topic of research. To what extent is this madhab uniform? To what extent they differ? Who wrote in it? What books could you give a person and say, these are the books of the madhab? It's not a complete one anyway. Some people might ask about the Zahiriyya. The Zahiriyya, the problem with the Zahiriyya is, many madhabs exist, right? Al-Awza'i had a madhab, and many, as we said, Bukhari and many people, there were many scholars of fiqh who had madhahib. And from them was Dawood al-Zahiri. And his madhab really didn't take off because of the fact that they didn't accept qiyas, like analogy. And Ibn Hazm came and revived it, and Ibn Hazm did a good job of reviving it, because Ibn Hazm was a great scholar, rahimahullah ta'ala. And he revived it, and he really, fought for it. But in the end of the day, the issue with the Zahiri madhab was an issue really, I believe, of usul. Like the usul on not having those things like qiyas and, taking everything without going into the meanings and taking it according to the wordings and things like that. Not that they don't ever go into the meanings, but like that initial taking from the meanings like that, it did weaken the madhab. It did. It made the madhab weaker, not having that qiyas in it. So that's another issue. But really, none of these madahib really survived except for al-madahib al-arba'. In the 4 madahib. These are the 4 that really survived the test of time. Some people still inclined towards the Zahiriyya, or took opinions from the Zahiriyya that were not in the 4 madahib. But it's not something that's extremely, extremely common. And also the other madahib, al-Awza'i and all of these madahib, they didn't survive, either because of the students, either because of the service to the madhab, either because of ink being incomplete, either because the knowledge wasn't passed down, as we said earlier. طيب. Oh, mashallah. Ya Allah.
The internet's back on. The Wi-Fi.
Okay, I think we'll not put it back. I'll tell you why. Because it's going to be too confusing for me to edit later on. Oh, okay. Oh, man. Oh, they were off topic. Ya astaghfirullah. Ya Rabb. Am I obliged to I'm guessing, I'm not sure, is it follow the madhab of the Imam of a particular area? In reality, this is a really serious question. And I'm going to say that you're not obliged to follow any one particular madhab in terms of, we've talked about this, we explained it. But there's an issue. Does the geographical location you're in have an influence on your madhab? I believe it does. Because the quality of teaching that's available to you. Like if I've got all teachers who are teaching, Matan Abi Shuja' and Yaqut al-Nafis, and they're teaching al-Zubad, and they're teaching, and I've got nobody who is teaching the books of Ibn Qudama, for example, in the Hanbali madhab, I'm going to really, really struggle to learn that madhab if I don't have access to resources. But obliged, you have to have an evidence to oblige yourself to do something. I love this question. I like this question. This question is an honest question, inshallah, and a sincere question. And I like these. What does it mean to be Salafi in the light of the topic of the Madahib? Wallah, this is very interesting. Because in reality, first of all, I'll tell you two things. Isn't the idea of Salafiyya primarily, are we not talking about Aqeedah? Generally speaking, right? Not exclusively, but generally speaking, we're talking about Aqeedah, right? So it shouldn't have anything to do with this topic at all. But there is one thing to bear in mind. The word Salafi comes from the word Salaf. And it means attributing yourself to the practice of the early generations. The Sahaba and the Imams who followed them. You like the name, you don't like the name, no problem. The issue here is, if you are following the early generations, does that not include Abu Hanifa? Certainly it does. Does that not include Malik? Certainly it does. Everyone agrees, come on, Imam Ahmad, Imam Ahl Sunnah. Sorry, I had to throw it in there. Rahimallahu al-Jami'. This is, at the end of the day, this is what we mean by the Salaf. So, should you find someone who attributes himself to the Salaf, who has a hatred for the Imams, you should not. But is it the case that there are matters of genuine disagreement among the scholars, like whether it's possible to take knowledge without a madhab? Yeah, there are. I'm not going to lie to you, there are. Ibn Rajab wrote his book, staunchly propagating that you must follow one of the four, and people refuted him. Great scholars wrote refutation and said, Ibn Rajab, you are wrong on this issue. So there is among the Salaf areas where they might have differed with regard to the madhab. Issues of taqleed, what it is, where does it end? Is it just taqleed and ijtihad, or is there a middle ground? Yeah, there are areas which are genuine areas of discussion and study among the early generations and the Imams of Islam. But should you find a person who attributes themselves to the way of the Salaf, rightly or wrongly, and that person reviles the Imams or hates the Madahib, I cannot understand how you can attribute yourself to the Salaf and then revile the Imams of Islam. But just because I say to you, for example, the Prophet ﷺ said, La nikaha illa bi wali, there's no nikah except with a wali, you can't go and come to me and say, oh, you're disrespecting Imam Abu Hanifa. You can't, just because I disagree with something doesn't mean disrespecting it, right? So that's also important, yani. Like if I take a position on something which is different from a great Imam, doesn't mean that I'm disrespecting that great Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala. So the interesting question that someone says, how can you go against an Imam? Who are you? I agree, but I'm going to say to you this. The problem is there's not one Imam in the history of the world. There's not even 4. There's not even 40. Maybe 4,000, maybe 40,000. And all of them had different opinions. So if I'm going to give you opinion, min indi nafsi, this is khata. I have no right. I have no right to discard the opinion of an Imam for my personal ra'i. I have no right to do that. But what I do have the right to do is with study and knowledge to discard the opinion of an Imam for the opinion of another great Imam and scholar of Islam, and sometimes for the opinion of the Prophet ﷺ or the ruling of the Prophet ﷺ. What resources would you recommend for someone who has no prior knowledge of the madhab to get a basic understanding? So it depends on the madhab. I actually sat this morning with the books of the Hanafi madhab and I was trying to make myself, I made myself a chart, but wallahi I don't want to say it. Well, you know why? Because I'm not qualified to say it. Wallahi, I'm not. I could tell you the wrong book and then the sheikhs could say, Muhammad Tim, just stick to what you're good at, man. This is not so I will tell you what our syllabus at AMAU is for the Shafi'i madhab. I will tell you the syllabus for the Shafi'i madhab at AMAU. Just because this is what we teach. I'm not secretly trying to push you to becoming Shafi'iyya. But what I'm saying is that's what I have written down, really. But I don't even have the Hanbali, I'm Hanbali, I don't even have the Hanbali madhab written down like this. So we start with an introduction to fiqh, usul al-fiqh, qawaid fiqhiyya, maqasid shar'iyya, and takhrij al-furu' al-usul. Introductions. That means we're not talking about any books at this moment. We're talking about what is fiqh. what is usul, what's a madhab, what's qawa'id fiqhiyya, what's maqasid, what does it mean to apply the principles onto the subsidiary matters. So people at least know what they're going to study. We start with Matan Abi Shuja' in al-Furu' al-Fiqhiyya, then we teach al-Waraqat in Usul al-Fiqh, then we teach Idah al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya by al-Lahji, and we teach al-Jam'u al-Farq by al-Juwayni, the first part of it, and we teach the first part of at-Tamheed fi Takhrij al-Furu' by al-Isnawi. Then we teach al-Madhab 'inda al-Shafi'iyya by Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad Ibrahim Ahmed Ali, and we teach, then we go again, like now we've taken all the books, now we start going again. So we take again, after we've taken Matan Abi Shuja', now we take al-Yaqut al-Nafis. Then we take al-Durra al-Misriya فيما وقع فيه الخلاف بين الحنفية والشافعية, or something, the title like that, by al-Juwayni in Khilafiyat, the difference between the Shafi'i and Hanafi. We then take the Fatawa of al-Qadi Hussein. We take Tabaqat al-Shafi'iyyat al-Kubra by al-Subki. Then we go on and we take al-Zubad. So now again we came back again. We take al-Zubad and we take al-Luma' in Usul al-Fiqh by al-Shirazi. We take al-Ashbah al-Nadha'ir by al-Suyuti. We take al-Jam'u al-Farq again, and al-Takhrij al-Furu' al-Usul again. Al-Ma'una fi al-Jadal by al-Shirazi. We take then Umdat al-Salik by Ibn Naqib al-Misri. We then take Al-Madkhal ila Dirasat al-Madhab by al-Qawasimi. Al-Istilam by al-Sam'ani. We take Fatawa al-Imam al-Baghawi. Then we take Tabaqat al-Shafi'iyya by Hidayatullah al-Husayni. Still going. Then we take Muqaddimat Nihayat al-Matlab by Dr. Abdul Azim al-Dib. We take al-Minhaj by al-Nawawi. We take Jam' al-Jawami' by al-Subki. We take al-Majmu' al-Mudhab by, and every time I try and say his name I'm going to get it wrong, Kilkaldi. I'm still going to get it wrong. It's a very difficult name to pronounce. Al-Jam'u al-Farq by al-Juwayni. We finish off Takhrij al-Furu' by al-Isnawi. We finish off al-Shirazi's al-Ma'una fi al-Jadal. Then we take Irshad al-Ghawi ila Masalik al-Hawi by Ibn al-Muqri'. We take al-Nukat fi al-Khilafiyat by Shirazi. We take Fatawa Ibn al-Salah. And we take Tabaqat al-Shafi'iyya by al-Sharqawi. And that is the end of that. In terms of hifz, we recommend people to memorize al-Zubad, al-Fiyat al-Birmawi, and al-Fara'id al-Bahiyya by al-Ahdal. Or, if they want something easier, they choose some lines from al-Zubad. They do Nazm al-Waraqat by al-Amriti, and they do Manzumat al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya by al-Sa'di. So that's our program for Madhab al-Shafi'i. It's not the only program. You know, there's not one way. Actually, for example, even in the Hanbali Madhab, I could give you 3 well-known, well-respected ways of studying the Madhab. All the books are different for everyone. You can go through the books of Ibn Qudama. You can go through the books who were heavily influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah. You can go through the traditional and skip both and go right back to the earlier books. All of them are ways of studying the Madhab, but this is the way we chose for al-Madhab al-Shafi'i. But at the end of the day, your teacher is going to set you which book first. There are books before that. We teach the kids Safinatul Najah in the Shafi'i Madhab, but it's too simple for the adults. It doesn't cover enough topics. I've mentioned about taking from different madhahib. Very, very good question. I really like this question about explaining to someone the difference between taking a matter from the Quran and Sunnah and following your desires. Wallah, it's a very good question, because there are dawabit, there are issues you have to bear in mind. For sure there are. Like, for example, a person says, no, I'm going to the Quran and the Sunnah on this. Like, we had some students who used to study with us, they never stopped praying, shortening their prayers and praying at home. And they never prayed in the masjid, and they never considered themselves to be muqim. And sometimes when you ask them and say, Akhi, wallah, even madhab ahl hadith, you went now, you've gone like, forget 19 days, 14 days, 15 days, now, Akhi, you are Allahul Musta'an. 2 years. And he says, I'm taking from the Kitab and the Sunnah. And the Sunnah didn't come with a had for Safar, which is true, it didn't. It didn't come with a guaranteed number for traveling, and therefore, I'm just doing the Kitab and the Sunnah. So the first thing is the person should be accessing the Quran and the Sunnah in a way that is appropriate to their level of knowledge. For example, if I'm accessing the Quran and the Sunnah, I'm starting with the simple books of tafsir, then I'm starting with some slightly more complicated books of tafsir, looking at my teacher's notes. What I'm not doing is just opening the Quran and make my own tafsir from the ayah. I'm trying to take it in stages according to my knowledge. Loving the Quran and Sunnah and being attached to it is wonderful, and you should be attached to it. And it shouldn't be following your desires to want to go into the Quran and the Sunnah. But ultimately it comes back to that famous statement, مَا لَكَ وَمَا عَلَيْكَ. You need to know what is for you and what is against you. And no doubt, at a very basic level, at a very level where you have not studied much, you really struggle to do that. And that's why really we say about taqleed, in terms of complete taqleed, it really is darura. You cannot avoid it. When you have not studied anything, you have not memorized anything, you have not learnt anything, what will you do? Except ask someone and just take what they say. And even if I told you two people's opinion, you couldn't evaluate between them. But as you gain knowledge in Islam, you do have the ability to evaluate. And so you tell people it's about accessing the Quran and Sunnah in a way that is appropriate to your level of knowledge. And it's also about progressing in stages. So you're not jumping to stage 20 and making your own tafsir and your own opinion on the hukm of the hadith and everything, but you are reaching for the Quran and Sunnah, because that's what we all should be doing, but you're doing so in a way that's appropriate to your level of understanding, and you're doing so in a way that is consistent with the teaching of the scholars of Islam. I don't know, it's a vague answer, the question is quite big. Up to what period of time is ijma'? Wallah, first of all, there are two types of ijma', right? There is ijma' which is spoken of, and there is ijma' sukuti, silent ijma', where basically nobody goes against it. I'm trying to simplify it for the brothers. I'm sure we have some usuliyin in the audience who are saying, Allah, you're too simple, man. Just tell people. But simply, and you have a situation where we all say in one voice, we agree. And you have another situation where someone says something very publicly and obviously, and nobody comes out and says, you're wrong. No doubt, ijma' is much easier to prove when the numbers of people are smaller, and it's easy to make isti'ab, to have complete view of their works. The Sahaba, the Tabi'een, it's much easier. When you start to get to our time, it's very hard. It's very, very hard to bring the conditions of ijma'. But you still have to have matters of ijma', and you still have to have the concept. I don't think, Allah Azza wa Jal didn't put a time limit where this concept expires. But it is harder and harder to achieve as time goes on. And I think, and we'll get one of the brothers who specializes in usul fiqh to give us a proper lecture on it sometime. I'm going to take this question slightly differently, about whether it's permissible to ask for a dalil. It has to be permissible to ask for a dalil, and you have to be able to ask for an evidence, but you must be very careful in the way that you ask for it. You mustn't disrespect your teacher by like, Sheikh, I don't take what you say until you bring me a dalil. But you must be focused on the dalil, focused on the evidences. So you must actually say to people, Sheikh, ahsan Allahu ilaykum wa baraka feekum. Sheikh, may Allah honor you, may Allah bless you. Sheikh, if I could ask you to understand this opinion better, where it came from, Sheikh, if you wouldn't mind. Like that, with respect, you ask the Sheikh for the evidence. And not, Sheikh, I don't take from anybody until they give me an ayah. So Sheikh, we've got an ayah, otherwise I'm going out. No, you have to speak with respect. But you can ask for a dalil, and people who are sincere in knowledge, they love for you to ask that. Like Imam Malik, look when people asked him for evidences, and he loved it. It was like, give me your sunnah, go and give me your dalil now. And then they share the dalil, and he changes his opinion. Students who are studying in an institute which encourages absolute taqleed in every level and encourages the studying student not to progress beyond that, and they feel under threat, yeah, for sure that can be a problem, because you could have an institute where the emphasis is on absolute taqleed, like, you know, and don't go ever go past it. I think we have to draw a line under the Q&A, Ahmed, now, because this is Fajr, until Fajr. And the questions have, like, some of them 6, 7, like, questions are written on one paper. So it is hard. You don't disrespect your teacher. If you're not happy the institute you're studying in, you go study in a different institute, but you don't disrespect your teacher. At the same time, you have the right to take the kitab and the sunnah and to attach your heart to it. And if your teacher discourages you from that, then for sure, you know, we go with what the Prophet ﷺ said. But at the same time, you know, I would say don't even get involved in the discussion. You know, when the students are all going around you, or you or someone, you don't have a madhab, and just don't even get involved. Just say, Salamun alayk, sa'astaghfiru laka rabbi. Salam to you, I'm going to ask Allah's forgiveness for you. Why am I going to get involved? Idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Respond in a way that's better. You know, don't get involved too much. Or if you do speak to someone, speak with knowledge. Say, so this is my issue here. I feel like the Shaykh is saying to me that I must never try to see, you know, the different opinions in the madhab, and I must always just see everything through what he said. And then he can say no, because, you know, you're at that level right now. And there can be a discussion upon knowledge, but otherwise just try not to get involved. Allahu musta'an. Allahu musta'an. Wallahi, people ask, like, can we study with you? And wallahi, Allahu musta'an. If you got to the stage where you want to study from me, it's not, you feel like, look, you know, what I try to do, honestly, is I try to take what the scholars say and bring it into the English language. I try my very best to do it authentically, but anyways, I mean, people can study at AMAU, of course. AMAU's institute is available, but that is led by Ustadh Abdul Rahman, who is deserving of you to study from him, and I'm just supporting Sheikh's work, inshallah. As for South Africa, wallahi, I wish I could recommend. I can recommend one institute, and forgive me for this, inshallah, it doesn't cause controversy, but I did go to Cape Town, and I was thoroughly impressed with Taiba Institute. I really was. And they were lovely brothers who were doing a great job and working very, very, very hard. So I believe they have an online program. I don't know how detailed it is, but that's not me saying there's no other institute. That's not, I'm just saying this is, you know, وَمَا شَهِدَنَا إِلَّا بِمَا يعني عَلِمْنَا. We can only bear witness for what we saw, and it was an amazing institute. Which madhab is closest to the sunnah, in my personal opinion? Akhi, I want to leave you alive, please. There's no way I can answer that opinion and get out of this masjid. Illa man rahim Allah, unless Allah has mercy on you. Wallahi, in reality, I don't believe there is an answer to that question. I do think that there are advantages and disadvantages to madahib. I do. I'm very impressed with the usul of the Shafi'iyah. I think that from an usuli point of view and a qawa'id point of view, it's very, very strong, especially because you have writing from Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. For sure, you cannot beat the reasoning and the intellectual evidences that you find in the madhab of the Ahnaf. It's very strong, and their debating is extremely strong. Don't debate with the Hanafi if you want to survive. They are very, very strong in debating, wallahi. But the point is that in reality, the kitab and the sunnah is what I want, not to recommend the madhab. It depends on your teacher, it depends what's available to you, it depends on, you know, in terms of the athar, the madhab that has the least in terms of usul and the most like athar, I think it's the madhab of Imam Ahmed, because he was very against anyone making a madhab from him. He just wanted the hadith. So it's maybe if it's closer to this issue of, you know, what we talked about, madhab ahl hadith. But then later on, people came and they put usul, and they used the usul of others like the Shafi'iyah, and they, you know, they kind of, you know, jumped on that as well. Like, and I can't say one madhab is closer to the sunnah just to say that. We teach at AMAU, Shafii madhab, Shaykh Abdul Rahman. What can I do? Inshallah, one day, if I finish all of my studies and necessary ijazat, etc. in the Hanbali madhab, then perhaps I would start to teach it at AMAU. I don't know if I will ever get any further than that, but I would like to. So the issue of the fact that what we find when we go to study a madhab is we find ta'assub. So someone says like, look, I go to study the madhab, as you said, I'm saying it's a curriculum, I'm trying to reach the Quran and the Sunnah, but I find people pushing me with ta'assub. You do have to select your teacher, that's one thing. You have to select your teacher, you have to be sensible about the type of institute, the type of teacher you have, because once you've accepted that teacher, you're like a slave to that teacher. That's my thought from the Salaf, you know that. That when you take knowledge from someone, it's like you became like a slave to them, and you become like, you serve them, you look after, you don't go, you know. So before you choose that person, you have to choose, you have to choose carefully in reality. You do, you have to choose carefully who you take it from. إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. This knowledge is your religion, so be careful who you take your religion from. But you do have to take it from mashayikh. You can't just take it from books and things like that. So try to take it from reliable teachers and go look. If the teachers are few and far between, if it's rare, alhamdulillah, they're not absent. We met many great teachers who are teaching Islamic studies in Johannesburg, in Cape Town. I'm sure they're also there in Durban as well. So I'm not, you'll find it, but you have to go out and look. طلب العلم لا ينال العلم براحة الجسم, like they say. You don't get knowledge by resting your body. You get knowledge. I'm going to tell you something amazing. Al-Awza'i said it. Let me see if I can get the exact. I'll quote it from memory. I know, inshallah, I know from memory. He said, they asked him, how did you get knowledge? How did you become a scholar? He said, بِنَفْيِ الْاِعْتِمَادِ وَالسَّيْرِ فِي الْبِلَادِ وَصَبْرٍ كَصَبْرِ الْحِمَارِ وَبُكُورٍ كَبُكُورِ الْغُرَابِ. I'll come close to that, he said. They said to him, how did you get knowledge? He said, I left off reliance upon anyone other than Allah. And I traveled all over the world. And I was patient like a donkey. Some of them say, كَصَبْرِ الْجِمَارِ, like holding onto a coal. And some of them say, patient like, like a stake, not a coal, like a stake. Like كَصَبْرِ الْجِمَارِ, like a stake in the ground. Like if you put a stick in the ground, the wind, the rain hits it, it doesn't move. Or like a donkey, it just keeps going one foot in front of the other until it reaches destination. And I get up early like the crow. 4 things. Put your trust in Allah, travel through the earth, put one foot in front of the other like the donkey until it gets to its destination. Or be like the stake in the ground, the wind batters you, you don't move. And get up early like the crow. And there's this Imam Ahl Sham. Okay, can any person use a single narration, any single ahad narration from hadith, from a single companion to establish an evidence? Yes, with a condition. Now if I say yes, people say, come on man, how do you know the companion didn't make a mistake? How do you know the author didn't make a mistake? How do you know you're reading it from the correct print? Be shocked. And that is that narration fulfills the conditions of authenticity inda Ahl al-Hadith, according to the ulama of hadith. And if that condition fills the authenticity from the scholars of hadith, I don't mind if one person narrated it or if 100 people narrated it. Let me give you a proof. Every single one of us, in all of the Madahib al-Arba', the hadith that you hear all the time again and again, which hadith? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Single Sahabi, nobody narrated it except a single Tabi'i, nobody narrated from him except a single person. Single. And then later it spread out among the people. Hadith, ahad, there's nothing more ahad than that hadith. Bukhari brought it the first hadith in his book. By the way, the first hadith in Bukhari is ahad and also the last one. كلمتان خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. It's also ahad. So it's like Bukhari is telling you, look, there's no problem with ahad when it fulfills the conditions of authenticity. Otherwise, mutawatir, there are no conditions of authenticity except ithbat al-tawatur, that's it. I mean, from what I know, in the ulama al-hadith, the people of hadith, the mutawatir has no condition except one. Ithbat al-tawatur, that's it. You prove it's mutawatir, khalas. You don't need to look at was he thiqa, ghayr thiqa, hafiz, wa ghayr hafiz. If 100,000 people, come in and say to you something happened outside, they all tell you the same thing, you don't need to line them up and say, do you pray 5 times a day? And do you, khalas, it's mutawatir. You only need to prove tawatur, that's it. Prove and balagha hadd tawatur. As for ahad, every single one of them, you have to research it until you prove it from the science of hadith. أولها الصحيح وهو ما اتصل إسناده ولم يشذ أو يعل يرويه عدل ضابط عن مثله معتمد في ضبطه ونقله. So the conditions of authenticity for the hadith. If you have that, it doesn't matter if one person narrated it or 10 people narrated it or 1,000 people narrated it. What's your personal advice to an ordinary person who wants to follow one madhab? I think I've given a lot of advice, wallah, just to kind of put it on. Attach your heart to the Quran and the Sunnah. Don't have ta'assub, don't be fanatical. If you're going to study your madhab, then you study it from the books of the madhab with the shaykh. If you're going to just want to know how to pray, then you find the best person you know to teach you and you ask them to teach you how to pray. And I think I gave a lot of advice in the talk, but that's my summary. Can someone change their action if someone brings them a hadith? Absolutely. But the hadith has to be clear. It has to be clear to them. Yani. That's the issue. And the hadith has to be clear to them. That's the condition. So somebody brings him a hadith, he doesn't know it's authentic, he doesn't know it's not authentic, he doesn't understand it, he doesn't know if it's abrogated. Like, he needs at least to understand the hadith. Yani. So even someone brings him the hadith, has a quick look at the explanation. Okay, the hadith in Bukhari, alhamdulillah, it's authentic. Okay, all right, yeah, I understood. Yeah, I'm going to change. Of course they can change. Inshallah ta'ala. That's the whole point. Okay, so this question, I'm going to leave it. It's a good question, but I think I've spoken about some of the aqeedah issues significantly, so we don't need to necessarily go back there. Why? Because I don't want to confuse people between issues of aqeedah and issues of fiqh. Because this is a shubha that people use to attack our aqeedah. They say, your aqeedah is wrong because you don't follow one of the 4 Imams. And that's like, they're mixing two things, smoke and mirrors, trying to divert you away from one thing into another thing. Or they say, our aqeedah is right because it comes from the 4 Imams. But your aqeedah doesn't come from any of the 4 Imams, ya akhi. It comes from Greece. So, there's no... they don't come from the 4 Imams, so don't mix aqeedah and fiqh. Can you explain to us the differences in aqeedah between the 4 Imams? And again, it's an aqeedah question. I mean, it's a nice question, wallahi. There's a nice book. It's called the Aqeedah of the Creed of the 4 Imams, translated into English. What about taking the easier of 2 options? Wallahi, you tested me today, wallahi. It's hard, yeah, it's wallahi hard. It's hard, wallahi. Like, if both options appear to be halal, see, there's differences between the ulama that are tadad. One says halal, one says haram. Here you can't just say it's easier for me to go halal. But one says, for example, there's some things we do like khurujan min al-khilaf, for example. For example, we know, at least from my limited study, that it's not it's not a pillar, according to the Ahnaf, to read Surah Al-Fatiha in the Salah, right? It doesn't invalidate your Salah. The Jumhur, they said that for the most part, if you don't read it, invalidates your Salah. There's a lot of aqwal, but generally speaking. What can we do? More than one of the scholars of the Ahnaf, they made it, and I have the quotes. They said, in this case, what we should tell the people to do is to do what? Read Surah Al-Fatiha. Why? Because according to them, فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, read whatever is easy from the Qur'an. And for us, Fatiha is easy. And also, خُرُوجًا مِنَ الْخِلَافِ, it gets you out of the problem now. There's no difference of opinion. Everyone agrees. And that's why the fatwa from the madhab is to read Fatiha. You didn't ever see the Imam come up and start reading, without Surah Al-Fatiha in any masjid. Why? Because here the ease is not about choosing one halal, one haram. It's about I can accommodate that and it gets me out of the problem. So that sort of situation is okay. Two scholars, one said to you, look, I'm not saying to you it's haram, you can do it. And the other one said, I believe it's completely halal. Yeah, you can, you can go with it because it's easy for you. But you can't just choose one on your desires, and you can't just, you can't take a halal and haram and just choose the easier of the two. Wallahi, very beautiful question, Yani. Is there any imam which is the best imam to follow? There is. Wallah, I'm going to tell you the truth. Wallahi. Ashhadu an la, yani, I swear, Wallahi, alladhi la ilaha illahu. There's one imam, the best imam you can follow. Which one? Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As for everybody else, everyone else is good in some things, not so good in others. You cannot, like, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the imam that you follow absolutely. Everyone else had good things and things that, things that they were better at and so on. What do people say? What do we say when people say if you leave your madhab, you're following your desires? You can't call following the kitab and the sunnah following desires. That needs any, but it's tafasir, like why did the person leave this opinion? Yani what is the reason they did it? Is it because the istabanat lahum sunnah? This is ijma'na. The ijma' came, that the sunnah came clear to them. Is it because the sunnah came clear to them? Or is it because they just don't like that opinion? Or, you have to look at the reasons for it. But you have to have a dalil for what you say. I think I did give you a straight answer. I think people said I didn't give a straight answer to some questions. I think I did. So that's what I have for you. I don't have anything else. I think I did give you a very straight answer. I didn't hide anything, or I didn't, put out from. Maybe they're asking you didn't give a straight answer which madhab to follow, but that's because there isn't a straight answer. How can I tell you which teacher do you have right now? Is a teacher teaching? What books do you have access to, and what's the teacher like, and what's your? I don't know how I can answer that question. Is it possible to implement all four madahib at the same time? To be knowledgeable of them is possible, but implementing them at the same time, it's like, to me, the question doesn't quite make sense. Like, it doesn't quite match what the madhab is like. Because if a madhab is a curriculum, can you study them all at the same time? You're going to get super confused. Could you practice them all at the same time? But if someone says it's allowed and someone says it doesn't, how do you practice them both at the same time? So, I don't think that this issue, but can you follow the sunnah as best you can? And that means that you might have some things you do that originally came from the Hanafi madhab and some things came from Shafii and something. Yeah, of course, that's the point. I said to you, Sifat Salat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the introduction of Shaykh al-Albani is very powerful. Allah, very powerful. No one madhab contains the prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam perfectly. Not one. Every one of them has parts and other parts that are not included. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying that you just pick and choose, but I'm saying that if you, on your journey to come to the Quran and the Sunnah, by the end of it, you are, inshallah, taking from other madahib and other sources, because as you grow, like I said, you start with the ikhtilaf in your madhab, then you look at the ikhtilaf outside, and sometimes you make an opinion that you say, actually, I believe genuinely here that this opinion is actually stronger than the opinion in my madhab. And that takes time to come to, and even your teacher might do it for you. You might say, but I'm just a regular guy, I'm never going to do that. But that's fine, your teacher might have done it already for you. How many times, I'm amazed, yani sometimes I see things, I go to a masjid's very strong on a particular madhab, and I see things, I'm like, look, I'm not an expert on your madhab, but Habibi, that's not in your madhab, wallahi. It's not in your madhab. For us, wherever I could not find it, I went back, I went through all your books, I couldn't find this anywhere. They're like, yeah, because we made, this is our tarjihat, yani we made this to be the correct opinion, even though the opinion doesn't exist inside the madhab originally. So we imported it into the madhab. That's how madhabs are, right? That happens. The moving of the finger in the tashahhud. These are like fiqh questions, right? So we might be moving off the topic now. Wallahi, the majority of the narrations mention keeping the finger still. And one of the narrations mentions moving the finger. Some of the scholars authenticated it and others didn't authenticate it. I personally believe it is authentic. But the fact that it's not narrated except in a very small number of narrations, to me would indicate that it's something that you can do sometimes and maybe other times not. But in any case, I don't see any problem with doing it all the time. I believe the hadith is authentic with regard to it, but it's not the majority of what's narrated about the Prophet ﷺ. On the day of Arafah, do we fast local sighting or do we fast with the Hajjis? In general, in moon sighting, in Arafah or anything else, there are two mainstream opinions. And this is what the scholars of fiqh, they call it ikhtilaf al-matali', or they call it i'tibar ikhtilaf al-matali', something like that. Do you now take into account regional differences? People use the word local. Local is the wrong word to use. It should be regional. Because a matla' is like the same moon you see. Like, it doesn't like, okay, I'm in South Africa and the other one is in Lesotho. They see the same moon. Actually, they might be in a politically different border, but the moon is the same moon they're looking at. So regional differences. And there are scholars who strongly brought the ahadith about regional differences and others who didn't. I personally, the way I see it is that as long as your local masjid and your community has a legitimate way of determining the beginning of the month, you should go with the local community. As long as it's legitimate, meaning they follow a mainstream opinion that has evidence. As for the one who says, like, I calculated that it's not possible for Arafah next year to be on this day, nobody said this. So this is not correct. So what I say is that in this issue of moon sighting, the correct opinion is either you have i'tibar ikhtilaf al-matali', you say that yes, the regional differences count, or you say they don't. If they don't count, what do we say? Any reliable sighting of the moon anywhere in the world, not Saudi. This thing of Saudi, personally, I don't know where it came from. Our mashayikh in Saudi told us, you must not do this. Like, make Saudi, if Saudi fasts, we fast, and if they don't fast, we don't fast. The reality is there are two mainstream opinions. One of them is we take into account regional differences. The other one is a global sighting, as long as that global sighting is reliable. Now that means there are some countries who sadly don't use a reliable method of moon sighting. They look, okay, Saudi said Wednesday, we've seen the moon on Friday. Next Wednesday if we could do it. As long as we don't do it on the same day as Saudi. That's not mu'tabar for me. I'm never going to take that. I'm going to say, yeah, your qawl is mardud, because it's just hawa. You're not interested in whether you saw the moon or you didn't. You're just interested that you don't want to do it on the same day as them. But this is hawa. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. You see the person who took their God as their desires. As for the person who this person has a genuine, like they saw the moon and they have a genuine system of moon sighting, it's reliable. Yeah, you can, if you believe that there's no regional difference, you can take it. But you go back to your mashayikh in this, because what's the point in having a masjid where one guy does it on Wednesday, one Thursday, and the other one on Friday? Like, instead, look at what your mashayikh say. As long as it's a reliable mainstream opinion that they're using, then inshallah in this, you may follow them in that, inshallah. Personally, I was very keen on the regional thing. I looked into it, I did some research, and I sort of went towards the issue of the global sighting. But like I said, my opinion doesn't count because I'm not here. In our masjid, we use global sighting in the UK. We say that wherever the moon is reliably sighted in the world, we're going to apply it to ourselves. But it's very possible the opinion for regional sighting has strong evidences for it as well. Arafah or anything else? Like Arafah doesn't differ from anything else that I used to say, yes, it does. Like, Arafah, the Muslims are all together. But in reality, the start of the month is the start of the month. Yeah. Like, I don't, you could argue that for global sighting, that this is one of the reasons why, but I don't know. I don't see that there's a difference in that. Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Okay, where do the scholars take it that women's salah is different from men's? So there's a lot of, there are some real differences, right? Where the imam, the lady who's an imam, where does she stand in the saf? There's a difference in where the lady, she stands in the saf. But some of them took it from issues of, I don't know if it's correct to say issues of maqasid or issues of like looking at the situation of what is intended by the Sharia and issues of haya and things like that. But in reality, you know, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Women are the full sisters of men. Everything that's described for a man applies to a woman. Everything described to a woman applies to a man, unless you have a dalil to make it separate. And there's no prayer better than the prayer. For a woman, there's no prayer better than the prayer of the Sahabiyat. And they didn't distinguish for the most part, except in those things that are narrated in the hadith. What's the truth about wiping socks? They get wet. I don't know, wallahi. Wallahi, it's true. I guess the issue is wiping over the khuf. It's a long topic. I will try to, I don't know, we don't have a lot of time until Maghrib also. How long do we have? 7 minutes. Okay. So wiping over the socks is a mas'ala fiqhiyya, of course. From it is the issue of putting it on in tahara. You wash your feet and then you put your socks on. And the socks being the leather khuf that's agreed upon, or whether they can be jawarib, made from wool. And that's a matter the scholars differed about. But many of the Sahaba appear to have wiped over woolen socks, and Allah knows best. On top of that, does the sock have to be of a certain thickness? This goes back to the issue of the illah in the ruling. Is the purpose of wiping over the socks taysir, to make it easy, or is the purpose the fact that it holds water? I see the purpose is taysir in this, but I still wouldn't wipe off 3 minutes, Allahumma musta'an. I still wouldn't wipe over a sock that's so thin you can see your feet through it. I believe the niqab is obligatory, to be honest with you. Wallahi I do. I believe the niqab and covering the hands is obligatory. Of course the scholars differed over it, but that's my, you ask my personal opinion, that's my personal opinion. Someone gets badly injured and can't help themselves to make tayammum, and there's no one to assist him. What does he do? So someone is in a situation where they are really in a terrible situation, hospital bed, not lie flat, they can't get up, they can't make tayammum, and there's no one willing to help them. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Do the best you can. Whatever they can do, and whatever they can't do, pray as they are. Because they do the best that they can possibly do under the circumstances. If they can wait until the time still hasn't gone out, yeah, they can wait for someone to come and help. But if there's like 3 minutes left till Maghrib, they haven't prayed Asr, they're already late for Asr, there's nobody there, they do, try to reach your hands to some dust, try your best. If they couldn't do it at all, pray as you are. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Oh, it's a big question. Wallah, it's a very good question, Yani. Very briefly, you find Kitab al-Jihad in the books of fiqh. So what's your thoughts on this? No doubt, jihad actually comes into two things. It has an aspect which is aqidah, like who do you perform jihad with? Do you perform it with every leader, or do you only perform it with the righteous leader? Ahl Sunnah, they said we perform jihad with every Muslim ruler, whether he is righteous or whether he has shortcomings. That's an aqidah issue. The aqidah issue, some of the aqidah issues, can anyone just get up and just start their own movement today? That's an aqidah issue, to be honest. But then there are fiqh issues. There are issues about sharing the war booty and what the general is allowed to do if he thinks he's going to be defeated. And there are issues about obedience within the army. There are a lot of fiqh issues, and they are studied in the topic of fiqh. So to get a good understanding of this, you need the aqidah issues in there, and you then need to go to the abwab al-fiqh, and you take it like any other topic of fiqh. Insha'Allah ta'ala, and from there you will take benefit. Can you make taqleed in aqidah for a layman? You must never make taqleed in aqidah. Like, you must never be satisfied with just somebody told you this is the right thing to believe. No, you must always strive to search for the truth. But there are times when you could not get that truth immediately, but you must always strive, because Allah said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ. When it's said to them, follow what Allah revealed, they say we follow what our fathers were doing, even though their fathers did not understand anything and were not guided. Okay, this is a madhab question. Soon enough, I studied a particular madhab and I'm acquainted with it. I've later on studied other madhab and opinions. I'm often approached by people. You have to answer according to And you have to answer according to what you believe to be the best thing for that person and the closest to the sunnah. That's what you have to answer. You can't answer like, look, al-madhab al-qadim, al-jadid. Like, you have to answer according to what you believe is the correct. Now, if you've said you took 2 madahib, maybe you took one as an asl and one you took khilafiyat, but you have your opinion about what's right and wrong. You must give them the correct answer. You can't give them the answer which is like, just this is the answer for you and this is the answer for someone else. Haram for you, halal for you. You have to give them what you believe to be the correct answer. We have 2 more questions. I don't know if we can quickly squeeze it. If the adhan goes, no problem, we'll just pause. I want to get married to a girl. I went to her dad and told her about the marriage. He said, I already gave you my daughter, but I'll get back to you after a week. He didn't get back to me. He said, change his mind. I went to another sheikh and I got married to her without the family knowing. For me, the marriage is not accepted, wallah. Not only from the issue of nikah bil wali bi ghayr wali, but it's not honorable. It doesn't lead to protecting people's chastity. It doesn't lead to honor, and it doesn't lead to protecting the community. Even if you believe that there is no need for the wali in the nikah, this kind of action brings disrepute upon Muslims and people. So I believe that you should repeat your nikah with the permission of the father. Allah Akbar. Inshallah, we're just going to take 1 minute to 2 minutes maximum just to finish the program, because there's no benefit to coming back now after Maghrib. First of all, what's the most important science to study? First, Aqeedah, then Fiqh, so you know what to believe and you know how to practice. How important is Aqeedah for a cure? Extremely important, because if you have the wrong belief in Allah, Allah wouldn't accept your deeds, so it's extremely important. On the website of the AMU Academy, it says the student receive a digital certificate. How will they receive it? When they finish each book or each marhala, each stage. Can you give us a path to follow to understand the madahib? at AMAU we give you that path. You could maybe, if you were not interested in studying from us, but you just wanted to take the madkhal, the introduction, just to get more details of what we did today, then yeah, this could be a good path, inshallah. Can your parents take your belongings without knowing? And not usually, unless there's a clear reason for them to do so. Like for example, they saw it's haram, or they saw that it's not good for you. What about those who take their fiqh without a specific madhab? Like Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, there's nothing wrong. We mentioned this, that it's a qawl mu'tabar. It's an opinion, it's a valid opinion, that it's possible to take your opinions, yani. And the Shaykh didn't go outside of the madahib, yani, completely, but he just didn't stick to one particular madhab. What about those people who make takfir and the hukuma and things like that? Well, it's an aqidi problem, it's an aqeedah issue, and we could deal with that in aqeedah, inshallah. What's the ruling of the general person who follows the alim without checking the source? There's no problem in that, and in fact, that is what we said. Your average person doesn't check the source. He can't even. His imam says Shafi'i, but he doesn't know whether his imam, who is his imam following, which books, which part of the madhab, which, he doesn't know. So he has to trust the knowledge of the shaykh that he asked the question to. My dear brothers, Jazakumullahu khairan, I apologize for the slight delay. هذا والله أعلم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.